Talked to Ann on Friday.
I think they sold their company.
She did. They did the title.
Commitment.
Mr. Chairman, we are.
She's still
Okay,
honoring
welcome
hers
back,
to us.
everybody. We're in the afternoon session of November 14th. Our first agenda item is an action item. This is the Homeland Security Grant 2022 EMPG. And at this time, I'll turn it over to our emergency manager, Mr. Juan Bonilla.
All right.
Welcome.
Juan Bonilla, emergency manager. So we're talking about, the first one is the 2022 subrecipient agreement for Valley County and the Idaho Office of Emergency Management, dealing with the State Homeland Security Grant program, being the SHSP, is what it's abbreviated to. That grant is a no-match grant. We have, again, allotted all of the funding for interoperable communications, specifically to our mountaintop repeaters, so we can continue that process of replacing a couple every year. The amount given for this award is $30,502.88, and this grant's good till February 28th, 2025. But we've been using them about every other year, so we're right on line to using it within the grant period. So that's the first grant that we need to have approval for the agreement, and there's two signature portions on this one. And then we'll just go through the other grant too, and then we'll just do it at once. So the next grant, again, is a subrecipient grant for 2022 with Valley County and Idaho Office of Emergency Management. This is the grant that is for the EMPG grant. It's the Emergency Management Performance Grant. And it's for $31,680.06 with a cost match of 50%. So we will get a $15,840.03. We utilize this funding for the Emergency Management Office to maintain and keep an emergency manager on staff, and the office going for the fiscal year from October to September of next year.
So Juan, this is the grant for your salary. The other one was for the mountaintops. And,
Yeah.
and that looks to me like it's gone up. Didn't it used to be like 24?
Since I've been here, it's gone up almost $5,300 and some dollars.
And
that's all both numbers are based on population.
right.
And then based on your population is how many dollars in their algorithm that you get. That's the two grants. These are a yearly thing that I do, so they're pretty simplistic. One thing is I will tell you on the SHSP, the State Land Homeland Security Program grant, before like the last couple years, we had to take a portion and put it out for terrorism.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but we always maintained that operable communications was maintaining that terrorism threat. But the state this year decided when someone gets such little dollars as us, that takes too much out of something that we could just do one narrative for. So the state took the responsibilities for those percentages. So that's this. We don't have to worry about that this time. I don't have to do two separate narratives, two separate granting situations within the St. Grant dollars. So that just made it a little easier for us to maintain and keep track of what dollars went to what, percentage went to what. So that was one thing with the SHSP that's different this year.
We get that in the budget for his house. We did. Okay.
I just need approval on those, and then I can get the signatures.
Everybody good with this?
I'm good with it, Mr. Chairman. I'll make that motion.
Approve
Second.
both of them?
Yes, sir.
I'll second.
Moved in second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, so the print on signature on this one. Then just the date. Good.
That's that one.
That's this one. And then for this one, we need print and signature, and then we need that signed
Okay.
as well. There's 2 seconds there. Okay, that's all.
Bada bing, bada boom.
I'll get these sent off today to logistics and finance. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Juan.
You guys have a good day.
You do.
you.
Every day, right?
Yeah.
Okay, our next agenda item is not an action item. This is just an update on commissioner boards. I guess I could go first.
But I'm
We had a meeting, I think it was last week, maybe it was the week before, for the Roadless Rules Commission. It's kind of an interesting meeting. It's there's about 6 of us left that are really voting members that go through all the applications that the Forest Service is doing in roadless areas. And 99% of the projects that they are doing are controlled burns. And we did a kind of a quick summation there, and it's about 500,000 acres a year they plan to burn throughout Idaho,
Throughout the state.
throughout the state.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of discussion about Tamarac's application, which is in the roadless area, their South Half, Rundich, and Perpetua. In the Perpetua deal, looks like the Burtlog Road is going to be the main entrance into that.
That was a preferred
It's a
alternative.
preferred alternative, which is not really in the roadless area. However, it's really close to the wilderness area. So they've got some hoops they've kind of got to jump through when they build that road. And I think that's going to be possibly the main access for the public to get into the backcountry, even further past the mine. They talked about using the East Fork and Lake Fork Road, the road now, and they want to be able to close that road off. But that's going to be kind of challenging because people got to turn and go to Big Creek and all that stuff from there, and so it'll be above that turnoff where you go to Big Creek, and those are just really kind of simple issues. The health district, as you guys know, Raul Labrador got elected to Attorney General, so he will be going off the board at the end of the year. We have one more meeting in December, which is kind of more of a Christmas meeting than anything really, but we are planning a spring conference in June in Coeur d'Alene, and then what they call an Idaho Association of Boards meeting, and it's kind of an overview of all the 7 districts and what we want to do legislative wise. And I'm not sure how many folks are going to go to that, but there's really not much more to report there until we see who the new board members are going to be after the first of the year. The other issue that has perked up here in the last couple of weeks is on not the 911 committee, and Kelly and in dispatch kind of brought this up together, but basically there's a push on to go countywide with the same exact radios for cities, county, road department, fire, EMS, and they want to do kind of an overall, they hired a group to come in and they're going to help us basically design and figure out the cost of this new radio system. Radios last an average of about 7 to 10 years. And after about 10 years, they fall apart. A lot of them don't work. And there's a little bit of an issue with there's spots in the county that they have no reception. So that's a repeater issue, making sure that, and all this is going to be looked at and studied. Right now, we're doing an inventory of what each department has, like I say, McCall Police, EMS, Cascade, Road Department, and see if we can put all these under one basic kind of radio type. It's going to save a lot of long-term expense later on, because we can all send them to the same spot for repairs. They can be the same in all the different rigs. And the discussion is that that's going to be pretty expensive. Some of the different entities like McCall Police and Cascade and they're going to have to chip in. It's going to be kind of a cost share. How much it's going to cost. It depends on how many radios and MTDs and all the stuff they're going to need. But that's coming down the road here probably by spring. We'll have a pretty good idea about how much that system is going to cost. Fortunately, we have everything totally updated in dispatch, so we don't have to do anything with dispatch. When we updated that, we got the right base stations, all that stuff is really good. So now we need to build a system around that. It includes radios and includes, like I said, the MTDs, and also they're going to look at the mountaintop repeaters. And they feel like we can cut back from the 13 we have now to maybe 7 or 8, depending on, this study. I think it's probably a good idea to do this so that we're all able to speak to each other. Right now, they have to basically either go to a different band or go to a different radio completely. If sheriff wants to talk to McCall Police, or someone wants to talk to Jeff at Road Department, there is no, so they do it with cell phones. And so we've got to figure out a way to get this all kind of a generalized system for the whole county. And I kind of agree with that concept, because if you have Motorola's over here and you have another kind over here, they're not compatible, and nobody is able to make them work and talk to each other. And so we feel like we need a whole large area discussion about it. And it may be, I don't know, it could be $1 million to $1.5 million. I just don't know. Nobody knows the cost yet. So when we get into our discussion at 3:00 with the ARPA funds, that may be something to keep in the back of your mind, that this is going to be coming down the road.
Put it on our list.
You got it on the list? And it's
I
really
gotta go move chairs. That thing's right in my eye.
blinding you. That's probably the biggest issue right now that we're kind of dealing with, is that 911 communication stuff. Health board. Boise Forest Coalition, Larry's been kind of going to that one, and Larry or Dave, and there's really not much going on with that coalition right now. They're kind of in limbo, because I think there's very few people that are actually at Boise National Forest working. They're really short. In fact, I don't know if we even have a ranger right now here in Boise National. They had one temporary, Mike, and then I think he's gone on, and they've trying to bring in somebody else. So there's not a lot of folks at Boise National Forest to really talk to us about different things we're interested in. But, I'm trying to think what else I got. Why don't you guys go ahead, and I'll think of it here in a bit.
Go ahead, Sherry.
So YCAP, they're actually doing really well. The pandemic actually provided tons of money to stabilize that whole system. They have got a lot of money in the bank right now.
Could you just, for my education, possibly some of the people out there in radio land, would you explain
YCAP?
kind of a little bit short,
It's the Western Idaho Community Action Program.
Mm-hmm.
So YCAP, actually, it's a federally funded state agency that provides assistance to seniors. They will actually come in and do housekeeping, that type of thing for seniors. They're the ones that do all of the chimney cleaning in the area. There was funding set aside for that. Most importantly, they run Head Start. So they have a ton of daycare
Oh, okay.
centers all over the state. They do early childhood learning education. So it's a program where in Southwest Idaho, they look at the needs of the community and try and fit those needs. So it's actually a very vibrant group.
Oh, great.
For a long time, we had some concerns that they had their hands around all their finances. So I sit on the budgetary committee for that, and have really hammered hard that they need to be very transparent in all of their accountability. They have to have 3 commissioners sit on that in order to be an accepted public.
3
field.
from different parts of the state.
Yes.
Are they
Yeah.
a district?
They're in districts. So we have Southwest Idaho, basically.
District 3 or
Yeah,
whatever? Yeah. Mhm.
So that's been a good committee to sit on. They're actually working with us on the daycare here in Cascade,
Oh,
working
good.
with
I
the
was
school
going to ask that
districts.
question.
Yeah, they're working with city or the school district in McCall to also start a Head Start program up there.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very engaged in early childhood learning. That's a great program.
Okay, well,
Before you
yeah.
move on, do you know this money they got, is it one-time funds or is it a revolving?
It was one-time funds, but what it allowed them to do was expand Head Start and put enough kids in those seats so that they're actually now paying their way. So one-time investment created an opportunity to become sustainable for the future.
Good,
So, yeah, so right now, they're doing very well. They've been able to add some staff members, which were really important for their transparency and accountability. And so I think they're doing very well right now.
Good.
Road Advisory Board, we have not met. However, they are going to call a meeting together here shortly. They would really like to be engaged in this master transportation plan and have input to that master transportation plan. So Paul and I spoke last week, and he is going to go ahead and reconvene that board for that discussion. And then maybe also review some of the concerns that happened over the summer on the roads and still staying involved in the conversation, but only when really needed. So
The master plan is in process now, so it'd be kind of is it gonna be like a finished product that they would look at, or they wanna get involved earlier?
they would like to get involved earlier. They would just like to be part of that discussion.
And we should
And I
invite
think-
Kobe up for that. Kobe? Cody,
Well, when he was here, he talked about open public forums and
okay,
inviting the elected officials. They will just sit at that table. They will like to engage at that level. The Economic Development Council, great work going on there. I have on our agenda for December 5th, a half-hour presentation on the broadband fiber conversation. There is some really exciting news in that arena. So I will update you on that. But basically, at no cost to the taxpayer, we have the opportunity to put in middle mile, basically from the Port of Lewiston clear to Star and Emmett. And so it's a very vibrant conversation at no expense to us.
Where would that pass and how would it affect
It
Valley
would come
County?
down 55.
Would come down
Come
55?
Directly
Right
down
through-
95,
yeah,
right through New
okay.
Meadows and down 55,
Okay,
and then up over the top.
oh, okay.
What that would do would be to allow, and I want you guys to have the full presentation, but that would allow all the service providers to, yes, that's part of it.
and
And I have put that on the agenda for
that's just what I was
December.
gonna ask, if Doug got this too.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
and
forward it to
a
you.
letter of
So you
support
have it.
on that, so. But that would provide the service providers a free, basically a highway of internet connectivity so that they would be able to reduce their expenses out to the consumer because they don't have to install the middle mile, which is a lot of money per mile.
Is that gonna go through Valley County or would that
It
go
would.
down through Indian Valley?
Well, it would go through Valley County.
Yeah.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
good. That was my question,
And
is where
hence
they
our
gonna
letter
let
of
it?
support.
Yeah, good.
So lots of conversation going on there. We have a housing CAT team. We have CAT teams, which are community action teams. And the conversation, so I am asking the West Central Mountains Housing Trust to expand their board. And part of that expansion is to put a commissioner on it, to put one member from each city on it. At whatever the request of the city is, clear to New Meadows, so it would be West Central Mountains, and then also the executive director of the Economic Development Council. So we're working collaboratively there, and they have agreed to do that. So we are going to be expanding that board as part of that housing CAT team. So lots more exciting news on that. I'm really happy with what's happening there. They're working diligently on childcare. As a matter of fact, our childcare educator just stepped down and we're trying to find a new executive director for that little role of childcare. So that's ongoing. There's an infrastructure conversation and a transportation conversation. So those are the CAT teams that are currently in place right now. Transportation is pretty vibrant right now because Mountain Transit has asked Lindsay Harris, our executive director, to serve on their regional board. So she's on that, but there's a lot of conversation about continuing or to upgrade transportation to and from New Meadows on a regular schedule to allow the employees down there to be able to get to Valley County. And they've talked about taking it as far as council. So there's lots of
They don't do
conversation.
that now?
No, they don't. There is no transportation back and forth right now. So lots of good things at the EDC. Let's see. My next one, the Fair Board. The Fair Board met. I am asking them to participate in the ARPA conversations as far as what needs to happen on the fairgrounds immediately before the fair this year. So we're going to be having an expanded conversation there, but they're really excited about the opportunity that may come their way through some of these ARPA funds to improve those facilities. So vibrant conversations happening at the Fair Board right now.
So, they got a full board now. Did I know you had?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned though because their treasurer is moving, so we're going to have to talk about what that looks like.
Oh, yeah, she's went
Yeah.
with Scott, didn't she?
Yep.
I know you were doing like a edit of their bylaws.
Well, they have bylaws.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we weren't working on theirs. It was for the housing trust, but
That was for-
yeah,
okay.
for the Fair Board, they have a set of bylaws that we might want to look at, but right now it's all about expansion and how do we make that thing sustainable down there through an expansion in seats.
Okay.
I sit on the NACO board. I take off Wednesday to go back and co-chair that housing conversation. I want to put it on record. That is all at NACO's expense. County taxpayers are not paying any portion of that. But hopefully after the 6 months that I'll sit on that board, I'll come back and I will have an entire plan for housing as we move forward. So it is, how do counties engage in the conversation? We're not the solution, but we can be a part of the conversation and bring ideas to the table to be implemented. I really think the solution, one of the solutions here is the housing trust. So I'd like to help make them as sustainable as
I could
possible.
probably expand on that housing trust a little bit for education, but maybe not now. I don't know. But,
The housing trust, we started it 8 years ago out of the Economic Development Council. We created, it was a CAT team at that time, talking about housing. Don Bailey and I spent a lot of time. We wrote all the documentation to begin it. We looked at housing authorities, housing trusts to find the right structure in order to create a way to make housing a priority for the region, but also to keep it in a pool of rental housing. And so they have 13 homes under their belt. They have 13 homes that they have either purchased, built, and are in that long-term rental pool. A housing trust, you can actually accept donations. A housing authority, you cannot. So a housing trust, you can actually have a charitable arm of that, and that's what we hope to do, is build a charitable part of that people want to help contribute to the problems.
so it has authority for, I don't want to say easements, but covenants, that sort of thing, so that they, going forward, they don't follow the market necessarily.
Correct.
Yeah,
I mean, they can do deed restrictions.
deed restriction, yeah.
They have 12 of the 13 are all deed restricted. The 13th one is in McCall, and actually they just were able to buy it at a point to make it cash flow. They worked with the local bank up there. Idaho First Bank financed it for them, and they only charge, they don't make a profit on it. They only charge what they actually have into it, basically. So it's a great program. And I think that the potential moving forward is, there's a lot of opportunity. As a matter of fact, if the county ever wanted to, we could actually turn these 3 units that we have, over to them, oversights, that type of thing. They can help with all of that. Lots of opportunity, and that will be the conversation as we move forward. What do those arms of this thing look like? And I'll update you on that next month. I mean, might know a little bit more. I'm asking through that board expansion to have one one person from every city, county commissioner on it, and then members at large from each one of the regions, just like we do with the Economic Development Council. So it's truly a regional approach to housing.
Terry, where's the 13 houses now? Where are most of those located?
There was one in Cascade that was recently sold. Those funds are actually in reserve to reinvest in Cascade. There are 4 in Donley. There's 1 in McCall, and there's some in New Meadows. The New Meadows ones are the ones that they own the land down there. So they were able to acquire those lots and then built new down there. But they are within or throughout the region, and they're very cognizant of making sure that it's a regional approach.
Yeah, I guess my base for asking that question is that you would think they would want to invest in housing that is the cheapest spot. So to speak.
Absolutely. And
You
they're,
want to go downtown McCall where it's the high dollar stuff. You'd want to look outside.
Do they have any specific goals as far as numbers, or is there?
I'd love to see 100 homes within their purview. I mean, Jackson Hole and Blaine County, they've got 100 homes underneath
Okay,
their wings.
so there is some kind
20
of unwritten goals, yeah.
20 homes. They're sustainable right now, but not if you add an executive director. They really need 20 homes to make it very cost effective and to be able to recreate housing every single month or every single year.
Yeah.
So if there's any way, potentially we'll have that conversation, the ARPA conversation, but if we could help them get to 20 houses, we have a long-term sustainable way to create local housing for the future. That will always be in a local housing pool. And that's what we need. That's really critical that we
So
do
they
that.
like rent controlled and all that stuff too.
They are. They have the ability to get IHFA funding. They have the ability to actually go to a bank, which is totally different than a housing authority. They can actually go borrow the funds that they need to do all this work.
Is there actually state code that's pertinent to this as far as what they can and cannot do?
There are national housing trusts, which they fall within, but they have bylaws and their articles of incorporation. They're a
But they're
501c3.
Protected under some laws or codes or something?
I don't know. They are not, honestly. I mean, it's a nonprofit.
Okay, so they
So
fall under
They're a
actually.
501c3.
It's non-governmental essentially.
It's not at all.
Okay, that's really important probably for people to know as well.
It's a nonprofit,
Yeah.
501c3,
Mhm.
but focused on housing for the
Good.
region.
Well,
So, I don't mean to be rude, but we need to move on. We're going to run out of time.
Let's see what else is really important. That's probably all for right now. Oh, workforce development. Still working on all of the workforce development stuff, and there's a ton of money that has been put in there by the state. They just got $50 million in order to create training for our locals. So that's really critical that that continues. So, all right, that's enough for now.
Hey, Ed, you're up.
Okay, I asked Cindy to kind of help me with this one, but Soil and Water, been kind of, tuning in those meetings once a month. They're very, they've got a lot of stuff going on, but a couple of interesting things that happened is we had some sort of source water protection areas around the state, and the pet drainage was accepted into that point source water protection areas. So we have we're part of that now, and I guess the primary value of that it allows for funding up to 90%, I believe, on projects that are pertinent to that. And so, well, gosh, we got all experts
We've got
here
lots of people here now.
on that. Yeah. So, so if one of you guys could give her a little better feeling for that than I do, I'd appreciate it.
Kind of, a high view of this is the Farm Bill allowed people to expand their identified basin areas, and it's a source water protection area, and that applies to groundwater or surface water. And because of the concerns with the Horseshoe Bend drinking water system, the death of the dog, and then the sick horse, they reached up into Valley County and identified this basin area and these subbasins, which I think is really good footwork for future rules or concerns or considerations. At this time, it also allows them to apply for grants to do projects on agricultural land. It will not cross over into development lands, though. It's, I think the best example they talked about was if you have a bunch of cattle, trotting into the stream bed, if you can, drill a well and provide a different drinking water source and get the cattle out of the creek, those are the kinds of projects they're looking for.
And that's up to 90% funding, I think.
And I don't remember the specifics.
Is that correct, Dorena?
I don't know that either.
I
That's
don't
all right.
remember that.
That's
But
fine.
it really was nothing to do with phosphorus concern area or nitrate concern areas. It was all about this drinking water or this source water protection areas.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dorena or Bill, you guys probably know this better than I do, but a point source is a source you can identify.
Yes.
A non-point source is an overall flushing of a whole area into a stream. It's a different, and it used to be years ago that the point source funding was about 60 to 75%. They would cover those costs. Then they kind of went away with it for a while, Dorena, and
What did you say? Did you say non-point source or
or
sorry?
point source funding.
source?
Point source. Non-point source funding is kind of a gray area because it may be best management practices for logging or for grazing, or you can't get within 200 feet of a stream now with a skidder or can't fall trees. Those kind of things is more of a non-point source best management practice. But a point source could include a sewer system that is dumping into the river and coming on down through the system. That's a point source.
Or a development like Tamarack.
Or development.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is, for example, some of the subdivisions that we've been looking at lately up in the Donnelly area, maybe should have some sediment basins in them and some to catch that drainage. They can fund those now and help that developer build that.
But that is not what this is about, because this is specific to ag. Based upon the Farm
Bill. Yeah.
We specifically asked if this could be used for development. They said no.
Interesting.
So what about,
NRCS.
Sure.
was there anything talked about like the South Lake sewer and water? That is a specific, oh, no, because this farm, never mind.
Yep,
Farm.
It'd
that's
almost
all.
be what Jordan is
Yeah.
talking about to change that water
Yeah,
temperature.
Right.
That would be more.
That could possibly maybe fall
because it's
in.
irrigation, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Dorena, you wanted to add something?
Well, I'll wait.
Yeah,
till-
we're going to get to that.
was my
We're going to get to that discussion with those guys next, Ed, after you're done with all your other deals you're on.
Anyway, I thought that was one of the more important issues that I thought come up at the last meeting. I did raise a question towards the end about your executive section thing, and I think I got that answered, but that was a technical kind of a thing. Or, yeah,
Why we call it an executive session?
right.
Do you want me to come up or?
Yeah, please.
So historically, we would always, at the end of our board meetings, have a session with NRCS where we could discuss projects that were going on with that within our district that is not public information. So they have privacy rules with NRCS contracts through EQIP that that information is not publicly shared. So, but they can discuss it with the districts. And so since COVID, we just kind of lost that opportunity. So this was a return back to that step
Yeah.
to get
I
back
thought-
in touch with
I thought that was
NRCS.
kind of new, and I was kind of.
So we used to do it at the close of the meeting. The NRCS
Yeah,
district conservationists would come in and go over all the projects in the area.
Right.
So we did it at the beginning because we weren't sure how to, I guess we could do it at the end and just kick everybody else off. Still trying to figure out how to work that out best with a hybrid meeting.
Right.
So
Okay.
those tricky things.
I appreciate that because it was easier to just tune back in. Okay, but anyway, and then I guess the question, well, why is it, well, it's some personal information in
Yes, so
there,
that's not the same as our
Yeah.
319 projects we can discuss, openly with
Yeah.
other individuals in the room.
Right.
And just FYI, we have 1.2 million, 53,771 in open funding right now through DEQ grants.
For EQIP.
Great,
No, this is through 319 IDEQ grants.
Okay.
So that includes, that's the total project amount. Part of that is direct funding, and part of that is match conservation dollars being sent. But that's a
Awesome.
pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Well, it is,
And that does not include our Water Smart grant, so that we were just awarded. And that is a 2-year planning grant for the watershed with the district at the helm, $200,000 grant over 2 years. And there's just a planning grant. But what that does is what you were talking about. It opens up the whole Water Smart grant system. It improves your application ranking for any future Water Smart grants. So it's a really big first step that would allow us access to more Water Smart grants that would be able to affect sewer districts and some of that sediment pond.
Well, and I think we're kind of way off topic here, but will that allow us to take each watershed and evaluate each one and see where our worst contributors are? Because I know one time that I forgot the name of the grant. That's what it did, and that's when we discovered we had issues with Mud Creek and Gofork Creek and those.
Right.
That-
I think there's still TMDLs written for those watersheds, so we're still working on that. And that's one of the reasons we did have concerns with any of those things that are affecting watersheds, wetland areas in Mud Creek.
So it's a BOR grant, Water Smart.
Yes, that's a new one. If I can, if you're interested, this is just our award letter that just announces it. You can have that.
And I think we should get Bill up to the
Super
mic just to put him in, get a little pressure, see how he feels about, You want to add anything?
Not at this point.
We haven't talked about our lodging yet.
Yeah, we're going to work on that. Bill, or Ed, are you done with all your,
no, I've
do you have
got,
any reports on waterways or anything?
I've got a couple more comments, but start with, the reason I asked people like Cinda, and thankfully you're here, Dorinda. Did I do that right?
Serena.
Anyway, you guys know a lot more about it than I do, and I think it's really great for these guys to hear a little bit more detailed stuff that you do, and I particularly am appreciative to what Soil and Water is doing, and taking an actual look and issue of where some of our area of concerns are.
So I'm just working on our fiscal year 22 performance report. It's due to the commission, the state commission, December 20th. So I don't have it quite done. I was hoping to get it done to bring it to you. But I think when that's completed, I think that would be a good information sharing opportunity just to see, because it includes the total amount of NRCS commitments for that fiscal year 22, how much technical support we're receiving from the state engineering services. And the state engineer has been contacted twice by private developers to assist with North Fork Payette River stabilization projects. He assisted them through the district, we're awarded technical assistance hours, and they did utilize his time and expertise to develop. It was for River Ranch, within River
okay.
Ranch. The second one, I'm not sure. I said I do have some concerns about us funding private development projects, but Kay Koski always taught me that you treat the resource. It doesn't matter, if we have an opportunity to treat the resource, that's what we'll try to do. So, but that's interesting to me that is starting to happen, that we are being, that's technical, and they do have engineering services, but they've reached out to someone who's experienced in resource engineering for their projects.
Thank you. And again, it's important for the people of the county to understand that we still think in agriculture too, and effects that all these things happen. And so it's important to the county. And thanks for coming out with us.
So, in part of that Water Smart grant, what that will mean, the Little Salmon just completed a project through the NESPERS with this same grant, and they did a monthly planning grant. They did you can do some temperature logging, that sort of thing, but no implementation projects. But it will mean monthly meetings to get everybody's projects on the table so we can kind of start to prioritize the work that will best help the watershed.
Thank you. All right. So anyway, moving on to, there's other things they do, lots of other things they do, we don't have time for right now, but, the Payette Forest, I don't have much to report on the Payette Forest Coalition. I think it's pretty much a little bit similar to Boise, but however, they are moving on. I asked Larry if he'd come in and maybe weigh in on that one because he's attended more of them and I've missed the last meeting. But they working, or I know they're still working with the granite thing and it's in the process. So it's active and it's still alive. And I think they're doing a good, taking a good look at stuff and involving people. They are looking for members on that. I know that this next meeting, they're going to be opening it up for some nominations for new members on that because they got 2 or 3 people leaving. So be a good opportunity for somebody. And the waterways, I don't have very much on that one as well, but just a couple of things. Waterways, last meeting, we had, they elected new officers. And in my opinion, without a quorum, because they have 8 members on there, there's 4 members present. Just for information. And so, which
Did you bring it up
emphasized,
to them?
I didn't. This
Well, let's see,
first
they don't
time.
have bylaws.
Well, that's my next comment. We're actually encouraging that group to bring us some bylaws, to put together bylaws. And we've offered from several angles to help with that. And I have not heard anything back, but I do think that it's important. And I think that's important really with all of our committees that, really, we get criticized when we don't have a process and we're not, careful with it. And I think it's no different with them. They do have more specific tasks of doling out tax funding essentially for waterway improvements. And, but it's important that they may pin down what they do. in a process.
Is there only 4 members showed up, or is that all that's on that?
No, there's 8 members. Remember,
Only
we
4
put,
showed up.
yeah, 4, yeah. So I didn't know whether or not that was, because there were really no bylaws anyway, and so that I can tell.
Yeah, that would
So,
be held to standard.
Yeah, we need to start over with that one.
Anyway, I'd like to see a little bit, I'd like to see us maybe at least make a formal recommendation to them. They put together, some more specific guidelines. And that's pretty much it. I think there are no big issues right now with the waterways.
Who did they elect as chairman? Zally?
Yes, Mr.
Zally Jolly?
Yali.
Jolly?
Zadala, is that right? Zadala? Anyway, he's the chair. I don't remember, let's see. I believe Scott Turtle is their
Scott Turlington?
Turtle is their treasurer. And I'm not remembering who their vice chair was right now. But we had some interesting discussions at the meeting. I felt like the meeting was quite open and positive, and so. But again, I'd like to see at least something on where they have an understanding that there's got to be quorums.
Anything on that one that showed up, waterways?
But that's it for me.
I thought it was 9 members.
It's 8 actually right
Should be
now.
an even.
It should be an uneven, but we appointed the 4 people that applied. We decided to go ahead and do it. That would, at 8 members, it would just force them to have 5 to have a quorum. So really probably not that big a deal. So, but again, probably
We'll let the
is,
new guy deal with it. Oh, wait.
yeah.
I gotta quit talking about the new guy's gonna get all this stuff to work on. That's a great committee. I served on that when I got started. They have a lot
It
of
is, and
coming up
a
on.
lot of it's just to deal with the buoys and the sheriff's department and that kind of stuff, enforcement stuff. But I'm trying to remember, I thought we had something years ago that we had to have a member from Cascade, from Warm Lake, 2 or 3 from McCall, and
That would be important
Okay,
for a regional.
I don't know what's happening.
anyway, if
with that.
anybody's interested, they did provide us with some statistics for this summer. regarding their inspections and that sort of thing. And that was from the sheriff's department angle of it. And no, nothing earth shaking other than they had a few less inspections than they did last year, and they're blaming that on the smoke impact on the Cascade Reservoir out from Four Corners Fire. So, yeah.
Okay. So we done? We good?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
we're gonna move right on to our next agenda item. This is not an action item. It's a workshop. Talk about 209 North Idaho, and that's, I'm assuming, the Soil Conservation District Board. And I know at one time here, a year or two ago, we talked about converting that into a residence for employee housing. And I don't remember, Dorena, what our plan was for you guys. I know at that time you were working at home a lot. And we talked, I think, once about maybe combining you with Extension and all that when they were down at KWP, which they're not anymore, so all that's changed. What do you guys want to do? Do you want to stay? What are you thinking of?
Well, we need something other than that, right? I mean, that's.
Well,
gonna
if we're going to
become a
convert that
house.
into employee housing, we
So
got to
what
find
else do we
someplace
have?
for them. And I know you guys use that as a match for your funding from the state. So we don't want to lose that value that the county does too, so.
Go ahead, you can start.
Well, come on,
So
put him
tell
on the
us what
spot.
First
He's
choice.
newly elected. He needs to get some skin on him here.
You need to come up to the microphone.
Come on, Bill.
So, tell us what you do. Tell
What do
us
you
what
want?
you do with the space.
And
What do you want? What do you
congratulations
do
on
there?
your
What do you
election.
want?
Gee, it was a
Close
tough battle, but
It was.
Yeah.
survived. We have found that it's, after COVID and all of that mess, it's really important to have face-to-face conversations, especially on the board. It was so impersonal, as you folks know. And so we have been meeting recently again as a committee, and it just seems like we can get so much more done. So again, the bottom line is we would certainly like to have a space where we continue to meet as a committee, full committee. And it's actually working relatively well to have that Zoom component so that we can get some of these agencies that are down in the Valley, Lewiston, wherever, that they can chime in with us and get some of their expertise. So that's certainly a good component. But for our local needs, I really think that it's good to have person to person on our committee. So we need space. We did go and look at the current place where I don't know, I guess it's extension office now, and they have a space upstairs, but you couldn't get one of those big tables in. I mean, it's really tiny.
No, that
So
can't be
it's
done.
completely out of the question to utilize that. And that's the only one that we were aware of at our last meeting. So that's kind of where we're at. We're hoping that you can come up with a space for us that would be adequate. And the other thing that I really would like to see, something that's available, instead of being a cubbyhole, like in the basement here and, someplace, I think it has to have visibility so that these people that have issues and they want to be able to access Dorena and all the resources that she's in charge of. So that is really kind of what I'm hoping, that we could find someplace that would be readily available to patrons and yet be functional for us.
So I guess the question, it seems like, is that you need a space for an office. Is that, you really have to have a full-time office.
And historical records that we're
Right.
required to keep. We are a
Yeah.
keeper of all the previous studies that have been accessed several times. In fact, the county surveyor came over and utilized our historical maps from 1955 to 64 to resolve a Valley County issue on no business. So there are some things I don't know how. I feel like that space is important. We'd like to keep it as long as possible, especially because we have this 2-year grant where we're going to be doing monthly meetings, monthly gatherings with multi-agencies from Lewiston to Boise congregating here. So
During a meeting, how many people are at the meeting?
we have had Well, we have utilized the EOC for the bigger water operations meetings.
Which would still be important because, I mean, those are just one-off type things. But on your first of the month, because you guys meet once a month,
Correct.
okay? And at those in person, are there 5 people there? Are there 15 people there?
Well, that's just rebuilding after that. After we've just started those, this is just, we've had 2 in-person meetings. I would anticipate probably 10 local people.
So if we set up the room downstairs in the front here, I mean, there's more than enough room in there to put a conference table and chairs.
Yeah, the issue honestly is they have a lot of records and they have a lot of big giant files, white files that have a lot of the maps and stuff in it. And it would be a job to move all that stuff here. I guess my question would be more to Pat maybe. Pat is do we need another rental? Or can we hold off for a while and see what the market does?
Well, right now I don't have anybody looking for a house, so. And we do have the one at 305, the white one over here open.
And it's open now?
Oh.
My feeling is I don't know if we need to do anything, just stay where we are. If we get another big demand and people can't find houses, then we'll have to come back and look at it again. But you guys are very important to the ag side of Valley County and the water side of Valley County more so than anything. And I don't want to disrupt that or lose that.
The other thing that we do have is with the Water Smart grant, we do have, we are funded for a part-time position, which will be perfect in that office. in that space.
Did Scott, has he moved out yet?
Yes, I believe.
Okay, so it's all yours now, right?
Yeah.
And the Forest Service guy's not there anymore either.
Correct. I did have a conversation with NRCS because that's something we're advocating for, is to get NRCS relocated up here 1 day a week. So that space also would be enticing to them because some of that's their equipment that's in there still. So
Right,
that
right.
would be
Well, we
huge
might be able
benefit to
to-
the county.
So it's,
Let's leave some of that to Teresa Perry too. Teresa's looking for office space.
Well, and I know Teresa has looked at the upstairs in the extension office and she thinks that would work great for her.
I'd heard that.
And so, but right now she's over at the real estate office. So,
sounds like maybe we should leave it alone, but maybe looking forward, at least include that in our master facilities discussion, for a more permanent kind of a solution. But temporarily, it seems like there's no need to make a change.
I agree with you 100%.
That
Yeah.
space.
And another thing that I would like you folks to be aware of is that, now with, it seems that we've really taken on quite a role now with the various developments and watching the water and the soil issues there. And sometimes that gets really involved, trying to picture and visualize and look at maps, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another, even though we're ag oriented, that really has become a big part of our meetings.
And I appreciate the fact that you guys comment on these P and Z applications, on these kind of developments, because for a while we're getting anything on a lot of this stuff. And I'm a firm believer in, hey, we need soil retention, water retention ponds at the bottom of this stuff. You catch it before it hits the lake, and that can be part of that developer's expense to do that. You may have funding for it, I don't know, but I mean, that's not our issue. And we need that. Otherwise, Cascade's going to turn into just a big soupy mess every year. It already kind of is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that will work for us, though. I mean, if we can stay where we're at, that would be awesome.
Knowing that we've already got a vacancy over there, nobody is really hammering us hard for housing, and there's a lot of housing stuff that's going to be coming on. I think this year and next year. I mean, look what Tamarack's doing for housing for their employees. A lot of that stuff's going to kick some of these out here available because people have a place to go. And I don't think we need to burn any bridges until we get to that point, personally.
Yeah.
That's
I think we
great.
should just let her set where it is and keep going.
Sounds like that's why we needed to be here.
So that space that Scott Klingon was in, that could be a potential, we don't have to occupy that. We can occupy the front space and that little office space for a part-time employee and leave our maps and records where they are.
Scott was using that front one off to the left.
Correct.
And that's available now. I think your NRCS guys could come in.
That's what I was.
I think, but what we gotta do is make sure we have enough value in that lease that you guys still get your state funding. That's what I don't wanna risk, is then we lose you, we lose the office, and then we don't have anything. You know, so we gotta protect our, what do I say, our match that you use to get your funding from the state level. That's important.
The other question, there's been a lot of questions on the 319 grants. We really need to look at improvements over on Westmount Road. There is some brick funding through the state for some of that, culvert replacements and those types of things. But is there anything still, Dorena, that you're aware of that we should be going after?
Well,
I know there were
we
some
still
big
with
ones,
every
but-
319 application are including a road section project or a culvert project. So
Okay.
we have, but I think there is additional funding and areas to source for like the more expensive project that we ran into with the Rock Creek, Poison Creek for the POV culvert.
You know, did any of that 319 fund the actual road-based material? Because I know we hauled a lot of big basalt and that kind of stuff to build a base. Was that when we were doing the $300,000 and $400,000 grants? You remember?
I wasn't involved in those. The only ones I've done are with every 319 is the 35,000 towards whatever project they're working on.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Which I know is,
Because at one time we'd get 370, 430 for West Mountain. We'd build base and culverts and widen the road and trying to get it to where we can someday come in and pave it. Do you remember that, Jeff?
All I remember is the 319 paying for the culvert work.
The rock.
Cost to do, road
Okay.
work and culvert.
We probably need to get back to that so we could finish that road up and make it a second road through the county. But the master transportation plan will hopefully tell us that.
We should get grants if we can.
So if it's okay with you guys, because we're running out of time, my feeling is let's just keep going the way we are
okay.
until we get another housing issue, and then we'll go from there.
Hey, thank you.
And Jeff will hopefully be involved with that WaterSmart grant. That's part of what we want to plan for the entire watershed is where we need to access funds and what projects are priority. So that'll be all part of that. grant.
Are any commissioners involved in that?
We
And
will
again,
get
I
those
guess I
made.
should,
It's kind of a long process to fund, and we won't really start meeting until we're funded.
because I was on the basin advisory groups and the
Yes.
WAGs and all that for years and years and years.
Committed already.
And I would be very interested on this too, if there's a spot for me. Because it's important.
Yes.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody need a break?
I'm fine.
You're fine? Ed, are you okay?
I'm good.
Okay, we're gonna move right on down then to our next part of our agenda. This is not an action item. This is a workshop with elected officials and department heads regarding the ARPA funding. So what I'd like is, I don't know if we got enough chairs, everybody come up to the front. We can sit around and discuss this. I know everybody's got some ideas of what they want to do and things they want, and we need to get that list started and go from there. I need a
There she is.
Doug, if I send you, oh, you got people online?
We have enough chairs?
I've got a spreadsheet.
More chairs in the
started
corner, you guys.
on these, but that's all right. I'll just keep them. Ed wants a copy.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
On that.
I was talking about it, and I thought if anybody knew any more
I
about it.
didn't know who it was because it didn't come up on my phone. Oh, and I'm going, oh, what is this all about? That's why I called back. With my luck, it'd be another Medicare call.
My trick is if I can't push back on something, I'll slide out and charge it.
love those?
If I had $100 for every Medicare call, we wouldn't need to have this meeting.
It's like, ended up on the floor. Sherry was there.
Hey, thank you.
More, huh?
I tried to get that chair to make
Doing.
too high for me.
Pat and Oak, you guys want to come up? Come on.
Yeah, come on up here.
You might have to grab a chair or two, but come on up. We got more room.
If you sit back there, you won't get hurt.
Yell really loud.
My voice carries.
Your voice carries.
Too many of us.
Chair over here.
It's good to be.
We got room.
Just a little bit, Chair, you'll be okay.
Hey, what's that white thing you write on? I don't know what that looks.
We pulled this out of,
I had somebody
I'm teasing it.
the other day, somebody asked me for a pencil.
Hey, you know what?
One second, I remember what a pencil was.
You're gonna thank me for this, guys. You're gonna thank me for this. Sounds good.
I just want some dots so I can put them on too.
Pictionary, is that what it is?
Yeah.
hangman.
Hangman. That's what I'm afraid of. Any more?
Yep, we're good. Okay, so we're gonna turn this over to Johanna.
There you go.
That's the last bottom line on your job description. That's the sign.
Whatever whoever wants to throw in.
Just throw up some ideas.
The reason that I wanted this to happen is because the ARPA money, which is $5.4 million, is sitting in our bank account, earning a nominal amount of interest. And interest rates are on the rise, if anybody's watched the news lately. And so we could be potentially earning hundreds of thousands of dollars on this money if it's not sitting in a bank account. But I don't want to go and put it in an investment for 2 years when we want to spend it in a year. So I would like some clarity on timetable for my ability to invest this money so that it can earn the.
My understanding is we have to have it committed by
2024.
24 and spent by 26.
We have to have $2.1 million of it spent by 2026. There's no limit.
Hey, you can come up
What?
where you
Okay,
can do
good.
this better. I mean,
So not only the 5.4,
Anybody,
but we have
yeah.
another 3.2 coming next year. So all in all, we have 8.8 envision for the future. And the conversation around that was because of the Clearwater project that we have going on right now, looking at long-term asset planning. We don't want to commit all of these funds until we know what the county needs are and prioritize from there. So there may be high priorities. But we've been talking about some of our priorities immediately, which may impact the long-term investment anyway.
Commissioners, I apologize. I'm getting complaints that no one can hear online, so I don't know if that's, if we want to bring mics down.
Max, come to the meetings.
Max, come to the meetings.
Oh, is that- You too, Skip.
So Sherry, can you give us some of the rules? 'Cause is it true that it can't be used as a match towards federal money?
So originally, when this all started, the Treasury Department had specified that $2.2 million to go into buckets, and it had to be broadband, sewer, water. That was all taken off. So if you received under $10 million, they just became open funds. Just has to be committed by 2024, spent by 2026. Then the next batch that we just got, the 6.3 million, just came through the PILT formula to forested counties as a separate payment. Doesn't have to be spent on anything specific. Those are unregulated funds.
And then the 3 point that's coming next year, is that PILT too?
That is coming through the PILT formula. It's not PILT money. It
No,
just
I mean,
came
yeah,
to
through the
forested, just through the. So all in all, that 8.8 really doesn't have any requirements placed upon it.
Huh.
Just the 2.2 has to be identified by 2024 and spent by 2026.
just the 2.2. And that's built, the built part.
No, that's
the
that's
first
the
one.
ARPA money. It's all ARPA money,
Built is like payment in lieu of taxes, so
and we get that every year.
it's based on the fact that about 90% of the county is publicly owned.
Correct.
So Sherry, do we get the normal PILT on top of this other stuff that's using the PILT fund, right?
Yes.
Hey, that's good to know too. And I know there's been a lot of kind of wish lists. We talked about broadband, we've talked about a housing trust, we've talked about getting the county shops out of town and remodeling the fairgrounds, so to speak, and trying to build something that's a lot more attractive and more useful there. And we probably should kind of start a list. But there's some ideas that you guys have that I would like to hear what you're thinking about.
So we don't talk over each other, why don't we just kind of go around and see what people?
There we go, that's a
think
great
about?
idea. Brian, you get to go
Brian, you
first.
start first.
Any money after that?
Nothing left now, go ahead, Brian.
Well, I think, I would really like to see what comes of the study by Clearwater, and kind of see what they have in mind for, the improvement of our courthouse facilities. I think that ought to be one of our big priorities.
Facilities.
Facilities.
And that's gonna include the fairgrounds and the road department and all that stuff, the way I understand. When we talked to Cameron, that was gonna be part of all of this overall deal.
When you're talking about facilities, you may be more interested in actual housing of office operation as opposed to the infrastructure at large.
Well, I mean, all of those are goals, right? I mean, all of those are things that I think are important, but I think improving our courthouse facilities and our office facilities for, all of the elected officials and department heads, and I just think we're a little behind there. So I think that's an important.
So under facilities, then we'll maybe just talk about that being as more actual physical courthouse facilities.
Mhm.
And then so the fairgrounds, something would come under a different kind of heading.
Probably. I mean, I don't know that I want to be in the business of saying one priority is greater than the other. I mean, I know that the fairgrounds is a big priority too.
No, we're just.
And improving that, but.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you did mention the plan that Clearwater Financial is doing. So maybe facilities based on the recommendations of the completed master facilities. And regardless of whether they're going to recommend courthouse or fairgrounds, we would like to see what their study says.
And my hope, honestly, you guys, with this much money is we can do all of it. Maybe not to the degree you want, but we can kind of spread this out and everybody's little goal can get done.
Well, and if we think about these as being grant match, now all of a sudden our 8.8 million could be 50 or 60 million.
Well, I think Larry's next, and I believe he has some ideas on that one as well.
Well, yeah, I'm all about grants. I mean, let's face it, if we can turn $1 million into 20 million, we're all ahead. And what's strange is we're always looking for grants constantly, every day. And there's some USDA grants that I read, they've used them in St. Louis, they've used them in all these other cities. They build buildings with them. There are grants for facilities. It's not just that we'd have to pay it right out. We're just going to have the expertise to not only find the grant, but work through the nuances of it too. And so we may need, when we start into this, we may need a second grant writer. I know as far as recreation, which is what I'm working on all the time, one of our biggest hurdles is finding the matches for the grants that we're applying for. Because right now we beg for matches out of, the clubs and the communities and stuff like that. And we're kind of running out of options in that. I'd like to see a lot of this go into a possibility, like I said, to turn $1 million into 20 million. I could celebrate that. That would be fun. And the other thing is technology. You guys know it as well as I do. Technology is really tough right now. There's so much more we can do with it. Number one, I wish we had a trainer, a full-time trainer that could really work with us on some of the key tools that are available to us, even with what we already have, but that we don't understand how to use. Technology is huge. And if you guys remember when we had that meeting over at the EOC, when they were talking about millennials and how difficult number one, they're only going to go to the place that has the best technology, and they're only going to last 4 to 5 years, and they're going to switch jobs, which is pretty sad, but we're going to need it.
Hey, Oak, you're up.
Well, I think that I would only offer my endorsement to what Brian said. I think facilities is a really important priority for our office from the perspective of customer service component that every department provides to the community and the public to have facilities that are adequate to meet the needs and the expectations of our clients. Yeah. Centrally located, we all can be in the same place and have the appropriate technology in the office space, the physical office space that we need, but the technology incorporated into that facility to meet the service needs of the community that we serve.
And I think too, we're kind of missing out on the geothermal abilities of this area up here. We could be doing a lot more with that. So if we do end up taking off the north half of the courthouse and redoing it, those are the things that we need to look at, incorporating into it. Because this is a really old structure.
Except for Cinda's office, it needs a stay.
No, we'll leave Cinda's the same.
Build around it.
Hey, Cinda, you're up.
Yeah. Maintaining my office. To me, this conversation might be just a little premature
Might be.
until we get the study back, because that's going to drive a lot of the things that we do. My favorite topics, I mean, I'd love to see the road department go out on gold dust. I really want to see the master transportation plan done. And then based upon what the Planning and Zoning Commission decides, maybe an update to the comprehensive plan or a total rewrite. I think that they just want to make some amendments to it, because I think most people believe we have a good comprehensive plan.
And that takes money, you're saying, to redo the
It
comp
does.
plan?
It does. I mean, if we're going to go out and hire somebody, it's going to be, $100,000
I'm just gonna
or
write down
$200,000.
updated comp plan.
Right. If I don't think the P&Z Commission thinks we need a total rewrite, that we could
No.
probably amend it in-house, maybe with some facilitation.
Does that need, is there a drain from this fund for that? I mean, do you anticipate needs for this?
Right. Well, maybe that money would fund it. It's not going to be for another year, 2 years.
If you didn't go out for bid, contract on that, you did it in-house.
Then we wouldn't need the money.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe in addition just to the, say, comp plan, maybe just any plans. The funding for.
Long range
goes
plans.
back to the grant thing. It's kind of like trying to determine what we need. Do we need a pool or a bank?
And then my final thing would be match to build some high density housing here in the city of Cascade on that property that you guys bought for it. I think that would be a really good thing.
Have you thought?
Because at some point we're going to have we're in a housing crisis.
Have you thought about offices underneath and houses?
Yeah. Housing
Has
was,
anybody thrown that idea?
Yep. That's what the housing committee was talking about, and we haven't had meetings in a long time. That was with, City of Cascade Medical Center, the school in Valley County.
Board of Service wants to be a part of that too, but.
I just think that would be really good if we could match some grants for that. I think that would be wonderful.
That goes back to the grant match a little bit.
Well, specific to housing.
Too. Specific. Yeah.
Housing.
Would you like it to say match for high density housing or match for workforce housing?
Workforce is fine.
Okay.
Local. On the property that the Valley County already purchased for that.
We do have a ground for it.
Yep. And I think some of those offices, just like we talked about, soil conservation district,
They could have an office.
they could have an office in one
The
of those.
Whitecap should be down there.
Well, and
I mean,
technically, we could have all of our offices on the main floor that we need to expand, so.
Depends, yeah, it just depends.
We got 3/4
Okay.
of an acre over there.
Allison, you're up.
I'm curious, when is the Clearwater grant, or not grant, sorry, proposal coming to fruition? Like, what's their
Probably
goal for-
towards spring.
towards spring?
It's a phase kind of a thing right now, and they're doing all the interviews and kind of getting some ideas.
Do you have any specific
Well,
dates on
I
that,
think it's-
Joanna?
Okay.
Think it's so far out?
Doug, isn't it
Is
1
that,
year?
that puts a
It's 1 year, I think.
It's out for a long
Oh,
ways to
okay.
plan.
Yeah, it's
There's
about
your
a
year that, then you need your money by 2000, or 2.2 spent by
We need to have it committed by
Committed.
2024,
committee.
spent by 2026.
I think we have enough to commit easily before
To
then.
do.
but-
I'm on board with the facilities. I will take consideration, of course, fairgrounds, but it can also be a good revenue opportunity too for our county. There's different events that can be managed well, other facilities are, and it's a good opportunity. It will.
So have you ever seen any plans from fair boards or people who did that this is what they'd like to see? This building built this way with these, whatever.
I do have some drawings and some.
If you could dig those up, I think that would be important to kind of share.
Okay.
I talked to Brian Hines, and he's got some plans that were apparently done 5 or 6 years ago on a facility down there as well. But it was more of where you could have big meetings, kind of like an oversized Legion building. Bathrooms, all that stuff was in it. And
Like a wedding facility, kind of event center facility.
That's what Brian has. I think he has the lady that's out there on
There are
gardens.
plans mirrored off of something that Sharon Wilson has, and I have those.
right. The other thing that I would ask is, can you get access to the building they built over at Cambridge, to those plans?
Yep.
That might really help out a lot too, as far as what we're looking at for that.
They'll give us some great, yeah, it'll give us some
Some
great
great starting
ideas,
points.
yeah. Our layout might be a little different. Yeah, I did talk to Brian too, just best use of space, how does that translate for parking and how do they do it in other places? And, they do tend to use some of their city for parking and there's some different compromises that they've made, and people made it work for their fairgrounds, kind of in the same scenario, because I know that's always been in the back of a lot of people's mind. Do we have enough space in there to expand? Is that going to be a usable area? But with those buildings out, new construction down there, it can be a very viable spot. It can be a really great resource. If we get to that point way down the road where we outgrow it, it's still this really nice resource that might be sold, and maybe we do something else in the future. But it
We
has a
haven't
long
talked either
time.
about buying ground beside it. I mean, Mark may be willing to sell us a parking lot beside it. We haven't had that conversation, but ground acquisition there could be a big part of that whole facility improvement.
Well, I know we've looked at, okay, what happens if the railroad pulls out? What's going to happen to that piece of ground? And with the city, the discussion I have with the city, that's going to be a street going through. One going north, Main Street coming south. That was, seen that on a long range plan too. One way that way, one way south. So those are some other ideas that other people have as well. But it doesn't say, hey, we could convert that into parking lot, or it's a drainage issue really. That's the biggest drain for that whole area. We'd have to look at that. But. Okay, so we're just, what'd you put down?
I didn't put anything down.
Yeah, no, I don't think you really need to. I think I'm at kind of supporting,
Fairground
wanting
improvement.
to hear what they come back with, and
I think that it would be beneficial for Clearwater to have all of that information as well. So any plans or drawings from their fairgrounds, if you could forward that along to me as well, and I'll make sure. Would you like me to
Include the parking lot acquisition.
So I'm gonna mention that as I come
That's
around
place.
too, and the fairgrounds is a big one.
Okay, Annette, you're up.
I gotta agree with the facilities and the fairgrounds. I think that's very important.
Hub facilities.
Updating facilities here.
Or a new one, either or. Need something.
Well, I know at one time we talked years back now about I don't know what you call it, but it's kind of like a park between here and the sheriff's office. There's no cars. It was a grassed in kind of a place you could go and have your lunch and they could store snow in the wintertime, that kind of deal, instead of parking cars there. But our issue is, where do we park all the cars?
Parking structure.
We actually looked at trying to get this ground on the south side of the courthouse when that came up for sale, and it was not only no, but Helmut. The city wanted it to stay on the tax roll, basically. But the parking is going to be an issue around here before long too.
Especially with ice rink.
Hey, anything else?
On your list up here when you get
Hey, you're up, boss.
I would really like to expand on that housing conversation. Government shouldn't be a part of the pollution, but we can facilitate that conversation. And I feel strongly that the housing trust moving forward is one of the ways that this county can help resolve our housing crisis. So helping to fund the down payments for a housing trust would be important to me.
How much money are we talking about?
Probably, I mean, best case scenario is $1.5 million and put in that, allowing them to create an executive director and fund that for 2 years until they can become self-sustainable with that. But more importantly is a revolving loan fund, something where we're not gonna just give the money someplace, but that it's repaid. But if I wanted to go and buy a house and I can't afford the full 10% down payment, then I have a silent second put on my home. And then as I pay down my home, I can either pay down that silent second, or when I move, it becomes repayable. Short interest rate, a small interest rate, something that
So the
there's
trust
actually-
would make up the less than 10% they didn't have.
That's correct. And so it would allow home ownership, but it would also, it actually allow us potentially to build this property over here. Because there are developers that would do it, but there needs to be some kind of a gap financing there because you can't make it pencil today. However, if the trusts were really focused, then they could work on what that down payment is, or what that gap financing looks like, and be able to work through that. There needs to be somebody totally focused on this conversation in Valley County in the West Central Mountains. And that's the problem, is we're too fractured. We don't have that. Every other county that's been successful on local housing initiatives has either a housing authority or a housing trust or both. And we're missing that right now.
Well, I'm not for or against this, but what I want to ask is, okay, let's say next year we get 200 or 300 homes built, and all of a sudden there's a glut of houses. Can we get our money back?
No,
So once it's in there, it's in there.
because it's invested in houses. And the thing is about building is your housing costs are not gonna be local. I mean, it would have to fall by half, again, as much right now in order to meet our local price point as far as wages. And so really what we did wrong the last time in '08, there should have been a housing trust in place, and that housing trust should have been buying property right and left and keeping it into the long-term pool. So that we didn't have that same problem moving forward. You always want to buy on the low side if you potentially can,
Sure.
but there wasn't a structure in place to be able to do that. And the housing trust can actually accept charitable donations, and they need to have a marketing program to be able to bring in those charitable donations.
What's that versus an endowment? Like an endowment instead of a trust, so that you're earning. Does the trust
Endowment
earn?
is,
Well, that's still
they're not,
earned
they
money.
don't equate at all.
Okay.
Yeah, endowment
Earn-
usually you live off the interest. Whatever you're trying to do, you take the interest off
Except
that
for
money
the
and do something.
future, yeah. Could be cool.
And a trust is,
What kind of trust go?
it's a 501c3, it's a
Just
nonprofit.
a nonprofit business, essentially.
Hey, anything else?
So I've already made a list for the last 6 months of everything we've discussed in every one of the commissioner meetings. Broadband is probably not going to require funding, just full disclosure. There is funding sources in place now where we probably will not have to invest in that. We might want to set aside a little bit, but not that much.
Would you like me to add it to the list?
Maybe broadband connection.
Yeah, or, I mean, it really is a grant match if anything, so that's gonna kind of fall underneath that. But you guys have really highlighted everything that we've already been talking about. The creative district, some funding for the creative district too is one thing we kind of
That's
pushed
gonna be a
around
pretty small
because
amount.
it'll be a small amount. And then the other thing, Scott's not here, but the recycling center, that new building, all of that kind of stuff. I don't know if we're gonna require extra funding to really improve our recycling and our solid waste management.
I think,
systems.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like that program should pay for that building.
And I agree with
We
that.
gotta raise the fees, the MRF, all that should be funded by that program. Personally, but I could be wrong there. And I like the broadband issue too. I've done a lot of research into it as well, and talking to, well, it's kind of hard to explain, but there's one out at Clear Creek. You turn left at Clear Creek, you go, before you turn right or left, there's a big white structure that looks like a big thing of mailboxes. That's called an office to broadband people. And if we could update those offices, and I don't know how many there are, through a grant match to Ziply, we would have plenty of broadband. It's the old technology that needs to be updated, and the research, they just don't have the funds to do it. And it could be, I don't know, $1 million or $2 million. I don't know what that figure is, but maybe that's something that in the incentive, but to match, to get them to replace us, to update them, because right now they have the broadband, they just don't have the right facilities to get them to everybody. But to me, that's going to be a low one down on the totem pole of this. You know, if there's money left over, so to speak.
Need 5 of those hubs.
For 5 of them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And they just want you to pay for it so they can charge
I
you
know
more.
they want you to pay for
That's a
all
whole
of it.
other conversation
And it's
around
like,
that.
well, how about we incentivize you guys to put some of your own money into it too? But, and are you done? I'm really excited about, ever since I've been a commissioner, I really think that the road department has always been kind of a drag on Cascade. It's not that it's anything to do with Jeff or anything like that or your road department, but it's really kind of not the thing you want to see when you enter Cascade. Is all that stuff down there with all those equipment and some of those little buildings. So that's been my favorite thing is why can't we get these guys out of town and use that somewhere? That's going to be my strongest push. And I think it's going to really build up the morale in the road department.
So move the road crew to
Gold Dust.
Gold Dust. I think you can put a couple stars in front of that one.
We have to be careful about just saying gold dust, because you have a northern contingency there too. We have to make sure that the Lake Fork is up and running, and some taxpayers would rather just see that be the shop. I think it needs to be split myself, but we need to make sure that both the north and the south are ready for the future of road capacity in
Yep, yeah, I agree with
Valley
you.
County.
The other thing that is we need to put on there as well is I talked a little bit earlier today about a whole new radio system for all the different agencies, the cities, the police, fire, EMS, road department, everybody's working off the same dad-burn radios. It's been a real controversial issue for a long, long time. And I don't know what that's going to cost. We're in that process now, but I think that's something that we really need to fund as well if we get to that point. We've bought a lot of radios in the 10 years, and they don't last very long. They just get beat up. So that's another big issue that I think we're going to have to deal with here pretty quick.
Sounds like maybe radios, we need to be in some sort of long-term contract, contractual. You know, you buy that stuff and then, yeah, I mean, you just.
Cycle them out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like with Motorola or somebody.
No,
Well,
not,
that's
not
a-
Motorola, please.
Yeah, not Motorola, but
That's an example. but
that's the
there
issue. Is
was a-
everybody's got different kinds and
Yeah.
nobody's working together. And it's like, you know, if we all had the same pencils, it'd be real easy to.
It'd be nice.
So, and then I think we ought to think about maybe putting some of it into the S Bridge as a match for a grant. Okay, I'm done. Junior up.
And don't forget Doug.
Oh, Doug, yeah.
He wants a baseball
He
stadium.
doesn't want to spend
Look at
anything.
that. Amen, brother.
I don't want to spend any of the money.
Yeah,
No, we're
There
just
you
that.
go, that's
right.
Hey Douglas, how about a hockey ring at the fairground? There we go.
Not a bad idea.
I know Doug.
Baseball. If I was just to be selfish, what I would like to see is this money be spent on the entire community, and I would like to see all of it being used on a sporting complex, indoor baseball. Now this is dream, but I want two indoor baseball fields where we could have baseball and softball fields, so we can host baseball tournaments, softball tournaments, an indoor soccer field, so we could have. I guess where I'm getting at is those sports that really kick off during the winter up here. Unfortunately, our kids suffer, our community suffers, our track programs, our baseball programs, our soccer programs. So yeah, what I would like to see is a huge sporting complex where we could create this and then be a hub for Central Idaho for cities,
communities to come and play baseball, play soccer, play football, track.
It could be self-sustaining.
It's self-sustaining.
All of our money back.
Right next to the pickleball courts.
And the pickleball court would be the genesis of the idea.
I agree.
But realistically, or not realistically, if you were asking me for what I would want, just personally, I'm not here as the county clerk. I am here as a member of the public. I would like to see a huge sporting complex. I've been here for 22 years to this county, and that has always been a concern: is winter activities in the winter activities in the community that don't involve snowboarding, skiing, snowmobiling, winter activities. So,
Can you imagine kids
smaller-
actually coming here for?
Well, smaller counties, I've heard smaller counties have really invested in expo centers that are hybrid sporting / fairgrounds / community centers that are that they're big enough that they can host events like that, but can be used for so many different things. And I think there's some examples of that kind of thing out there already.
And I
The Franklin Sports Arena?
think this is something that we could, also discuss. I don't know if the city of McCall received any ARPA dollars. I don't know if the city of Cascade received any ARPA dollars.
They did, but those are all been committed.
They're all committed. Okay. So
Hey Doug, thanks.
that's just what I personally would want. And that's as I'm taking off my county clerk hat and, but realistically, now I'm putting my county clerk hat on, and realistically, this amount of money that we have, we should potentially distribute to all of these projects. But it's going to be challenging to do.
It's really an exciting idea.
And it's okay for the county clerk to have the idea too.
Yeah.
The only problem is
Illegal.
we'll
However,
kill each other on the location of something like that.
the location would be, there would have to be some compromises.
Apco, I think.
I think, well, if we're, I don't know,
Central to the county.
they have to be central to the county.
Well, I think you have some really nice property right across the road here. We don't, but there.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Other Doug wants
good luck on that one.
What's that?
You want to squirrel it.
Yeah.
We need a Verizon
County
Sports
clerk
Arena.
Doug wants to hold on to this money as long as possible until,
Treasure to retire.
yeah.
I think I kind of heard that up
Okay.
there too. Interest.
Okay, we gotta move on. We're gonna run out of time. June, you're up.
Okay, I like waiting for the Clearwater study. I want to see what they say. I also believe in saving. I like the idea of having a slush fund, putting some of this money away. None of us know what's going to happen in the future. We don't want to get caught with short change with no money. I would like to see us let our treasurer invest it for as long as she can, but also consider looking at what we need to do with it. Have the appropriate amount committed by 2024. Do have it spent by 2026, but also prioritize what the Clearwater study comes back with and try to invest and save part of this. I think it's really important. I want to see all of us working in the same location. I think it's important that all of our offices are in one location. Thank you for the offices, Mr. Prosecuting Attorney. My staff is very thrilled that we have room, but I would still like to see your staff and offices back here at the county seat with the rest of us at the courthouse. So I think that's very important that we're all together. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, we also have Skip Clapp joining us via Teams.
Kim, you wanna say anything?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll make this quick. First, I just want to echo the Bryans. And it makes a lot of sense to me to invest in the technology and the facilities we have to improve our productivity and our customer service. I mean, that's something that always needs to happen, and I think it can be improved. The fact that I'm having a hard time just joining you guys via Zoom right now is, I think, an example. And that's not a criticism, it's just my feelings. My number 2 was, I agree with Doug on a community center to support the health and well-being of our juveniles and families. That also can be used for extracurricular activities, sports, community events, with the ability for growth based on our community needs and priorities. And then number 3, to make it quick, is just to kind of, I agreed with Commissioner Moffitt on the idea of taking advantage of getting those properties and housing and trusts and whatever. I don't know much about that end, but that'd be my number 3. So that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Sheriff.
You guys have covered a lot of it, and I was looking at wanting to wait for Clearwater because I wanted to find out what if they are going to do about security over at my building, because we've got security at the courthouse. My staff, a lot of times, with driver's license and different, jobs that they have to do over there. There's no security, and they said, well, you've got cops there with guns, and but it's not. We're not focusing on the security and who's coming through, and they do sometimes get a little loud and not happy with my staff, and we're just doing the best we can. But so that would be something would be the security of that area as well.
Expand that to say in general. but,
Yeah.
Of all
Yes.
Security.
So,
You think you need more office space over there?
right now, we wouldn't need the office space where they're at, where the administrative ladies are working. But there needs to be some better security for them.
Got it?
Because our doors are a lot of times are shut between for patrol and the rest of the admin staff. So that was one thing. And thank you for not taking my upstairs off my EOC.
Step two, Sheriff.
So anyway, and then, yeah, just technology. And I don't know what your Tyler technology that you're going to, if that has a new payroll programming with it, because that archaic system we've had since I worked here in 1974. So.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And that would help if we can spend some money on upgrading some of the functions that we're doing right now. That's a small amount of money for that. So, I like the sporting event type situation because I think that could be used.
Baseball field.
That could be used countywide. I mean, not only maybe it would be tied in with the fairgrounds or anything, but this weekend I was down in Salt Lake and we pulled into a parking lot and there was this looked like a strip mall, but it was like workout, jiu-jitsu, trampoline. The little kids were running in to do their dance, and there was tumbling and basketball and pickleball and the whole thing in this whole complex. And so that, when you said that, I thought, yeah, that parking lot was full, and it was all, about working out, take care of yourself, and your community, yeah. So
Was it a private sector managed facility or?
I don't know. I just pulled in there and checking some directions and took all that in and just watched it for a while. So. But yeah, I think that this money should be set for countywide.
What about a new dishwasher in the jail? We've been wanting that for a long
We've been limping along on that, yeah.
Hey, Ed, you're up.
Yeah, well, I was wiping the sleep out of my eyes this morning, made a couple of the list, and a list. All has pretty much been covered. And then some. So anyway, but I just made this one statement that I like is spend this on something positive, needed projects, and make something whole. In other words, I would encourage you not to just fragment it. And, because we still got to go on and carry on as a county. You know, the taxpayer has to pay for a lot of the stuff we're talking about, you know? So take this as to me, I think it was an opportunity for all, communities, essentially. Look at what is it that we really need here? And I particularly appreciated Clerk Miller's comment. I hadn't really thought about that part of it. What would that do to the community? So I had to talk about things what do we offer in Valley County? That's the kind of stuff we offer. A place for people to go and recreate, to see the beauty of our country. And so maybe that's the things that we ought to try to gear this kind of thing to. But then the facilities for managing the county are equally important. In other words, having that our hub of operations, but expand that out, but take this and don't fragment it. And that's why I wanted to see a list. Something we can go through, and evaluate later. So facilities, we've already talked enough about that. And I think that the plan's going to really help us on that. And we got time on this money, the recreation opportunities, state leases, rec facilities. There's all kinds of possibilities in every department, really. But when we look at it, focus on what we do here and what we can make people smile about when they come here, either live or to recreate. There's all kinds of trails, air quality improvements. There's agriculture. Let's don't forget the agricultural community. We talked about that, and of course, you said you're representing that to some extent. And we appreciate that. The things we do, access is a big one, and I imagine our next guest here will give some ideas on that one. So
everything was already said. It's already up there. You guys made my job easy.
So
Except for if we tap into the geothermal, I want all my roads heated.
Well, get rid of that salt, all right.
We just got rid of all snow plowing.
I like easy way to settle everything.
I really like.
What about roads though? I mean,
He's coming, Jeff's coming up, hold on.
I really like that Larry's idea of, it's probably a really good idea to have some grant matching fund. So, I don't think you can go wrong on that one. And I think June brought that one out a little bit more as well. But I will say that I don't think we ought to view it as savings, personally. I think we view it as something it's good to have the savings until we spend it. But I don't think you should view it as a bank account. Because I think we need to do something with it. Something that really shows. Okay, so if I had to have my 2 cents worth, 2 things that could happen that we could actually do with this is we could move the road department and we could put some real emphasis into the fairgrounds. And no matter what we do with the facilities plan, those things are probably, I don't know how you can take them off the table. So, if you really want to do some commitment, the fairgrounds really falls into this. Clerk Miller's ideas to some extent, you can expand on that. That could all, instead of just being, it could be a bigger center thing. It could be, say, you could possibly do that. I'm not saying, I don't know if you can or can't, but, a lot of things can be done down there. One of the things about Cascade, it has a really unique opportunity, in my opinion. When you drive through this country, you come into Cascade, there's places here you can actually stop, enjoy yourself for a little while outdoors. In the summertime, you can have your picnics. You can go to see some kind of neat things like whitewater sports down the river. You got lots of space here that could be developed into something pretty nice for the city of Cascade, in my opinion, and the county. So that's my 2 cents. I think we ought to focus a little bit on that one first. Area.
Sorry, it's not your turn.
Well, Ed has disappointed me.
I disappointed you.
He didn't talk
For the
about,
first time in 20 years.
I know. You didn't talk about changing the configuration.
Oh,
of it.
We're working on that one. That falls under facilities a little bit.
Okay,
We're working
okay,
on it. But it needs to be done.
I know.
I'll continue that one, but we probably don't want to take too much of this money for it.
All right, Jeff, you're up.
You guys pretty well covered it.
He did roads.
I know.
Did roads.
Heated roads.
I mean, I'm looking at this, thinking of this money. Sounds like a lot. When it comes to building roads, it's not very much.
No.
Most of you know what I paid for 5 miles of paving this year.
Mhm.
Didn't go very far. The S Bridge, we had a presentation from Parametrics last week. I kind of knew what the cost was ahead of time, ballpark. Even a match on that's going to be a couple $1 million just for match, because we're looking at $15 to $30 million to replace that bridge.
And I forgot to mention, I don't think we should use it to do that.
Right,
kind of
right,
thing.
but saving, I
Personally,
like the
that's-
idea of,
Yeah.
so by 2024, we have to commit 2.5. That's pretty easy. I mean, between all of us, however it gets divvied up, and the rest of it, yeah. Grant match. Put it into your certificates or whatever it is you do with our money. I don't know what you do with it, but you do good.
If you think about one-time investments with Jeff's World, I mean, we could invest in a road and you gotta reinvest in 10 years on it. if you do.
Right, that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's an ongoing, deal instead of one-time investment where you create a sustainable project for the future.
Mhm.
That could end up paying for itself.
But being the road department, I would put my #1 vote on getting me out of the city.
You'd love to.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I know.
So could we set after people just think about this for a week or so, could we set up another hour for this discussion, say in maybe 2 weeks?
I think we should get
After the
the,
updates.
get the Clearwater update first, Ed.
Yep.
Let's get the Clearwater update first, and that's gonna take a while. If they come back and say we need, I don't know, I'm just gonna say $3 million to rebuild the north end of the courthouse or whatever that is, then that's gonna tell us how much money we got left to do the rest of this.
Well,
To me, I think that's my number one priority is get
Well,
everybody
that
here.
depends on if that's where we decide we want to spend it. Do we want to spend it for that? See, that's the thing that bothers me. I don't want it to get, personally, don't want it to get filtered off under these ongoing management things that we're going to deal with. We're still going to have to go, for instance, on the roads. Eventually, we're going to have to go through maybe a levy, districts, whatever it takes to manage to move forward that. But this is really not, to me, this is an opportunity to fix something.
We didn't ask Johanna.
Right.
Yeah.
I know I'm the note taker.
That's in the back.
I do have a few opinions. And I think that first and foremost, we need to wait for the study to be completed. And that's about a year from now. And I think that in that year, if invested properly, we could make $300,000 in interest, which is just compounding this money for us. After that is complete, and I think that between now and then, we continue meeting and we iron out what is going to be the best for the county. In my opinion, what is going to be the best is something that is a legacy, that is not going to burden the taxpayers. So a rec center is a perfect example. Could be self-sustaining financially, and it's going to be something, we don't get $8 million from the government on a regular basis. This is kind of a once in our lifetime type of opportunity. We should capitalize on it in the best way possible that's good for the community, but also not create sustained expense. Obviously we'd love to be able to give everybody at the county a raise, but that's not sustainable. We can't keep that up. We'd have to increase property taxes to be able to pay for that. And so we need to benefit people here at the county, whether it's in the master's facility plan or some legacy project like a rec center. And we should capitalize on match grants. we could turn that 8, 9, $10 million by the time we're ready to break ground on something into 20, 30, or 40 million based on grant matches. I agree. I think we need to meet again in a few weeks.
Do too. I think we can't let it get cold. We need to come back. Because, you know, we do have the plan coming. That's all fine and good. But there's stuff here that we know. For instance, no matter what the plan says, it's going to be arguably hard to convince anybody that we shouldn't, for instance, move the road crew. You know, so that could, right up front, that just needs to be part of the plan. You know, and then, anyway.
So we had 400 responses out of our survey, but now that we know we have this much money, do you guys think we should go back out and redo that survey?
My feeling on that, I don't know if we should do the survey, but I think what we come up with here as a group, this is where we would like to spend. We need to put that out and see what the public says.
With a timeline too, because some of this is, you're talking about how money will make money. So there's better times to work on this building than there is upfront with this initial money. Where does that go in the best place to go first?
You know, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, instead of maybe a survey where you don't know how many times one person is commenting, why don't you have some town halls? Where you invite the public in to actually say something.
But first, it'd be great if we could offer them a list of, a brainstorm list too, you know, to work against. Because this is based, I don't think we're falling too far off of what our results from that.
Well, and some of the stuff has changed, like I know broadband was a big emphasis on that survey. Now that's kind of changed because there's funding out there that's going to cover that. So to me, I think we need to kind of give a little bulletin board. This is what we're thinking about. And we're going to miss something that somebody says, hey, why don't you guys do this? It's like, whoa, that's a good idea.
Community.
Well, I think we also need to remember that these are the kinds of decisions that folks are elected for. You know, you guys were all elected to make these decisions, and you know the voters, you know, by electing us, trust us to make these decisions. Obviously, we want to be transparent about it. We want to let the public know what we're doing, and hearing public comment is great. But you know, by and large, we're elected to make these decisions and trusted with these decisions.
You can't get bogged down too badly.
That's the tricky part is you can wind up with too many cooks in the kitchen, and
Right.
kind of end up.
I think one thing that concerns me a little bit is the way money is accumulated nowadays is different than it used to be. When we talk about $8 million, Commissioner Mott was talking about the Housing Authority and some other things. So all that, there's billions and billions of dollars in that EDA grant, and I get those emails about once a month, and I'm watching all these small communities get these incredible things. And we looked at an EDA grant at one point, and our grant writer said, no, we weren't eligible for it. But things have changed so dramatically, and I don't know if anybody here has the expertise to really research the grant potentials. We may need to find, maybe it's a private sector company that does that or something. But I don't think we're looking closely enough at all the potential that we can turn this money into.
We do have a new grant writer coming on board right away.
The key word there is new.
Well, yeah, but that.
And I don't even think our last grant writer, because times have changed so dramatically and there's so much money out there. I hate to see it pass us by. I don't want to see St. Louis or some town in Mississippi's a nice place, but I think it all should come right here.
Well, and the way I look at that is if we come up with the Doug Miller baseball stadium, we don't have enough money to do it. But
Absolutely.
we've got the plans.
Yeah.
We've got everything done. We're shovel ready. Now let's go out for an EDA. That's when we want to fire up.
And that's the other thing about this.
Like Verizon.
That's the other thing about this. If we recognize just in this discussion, like if there's going to be a lot of needs for some of those planning processes.
Yes.
And that's a good investment for some of this. You know, and it's not just one branch, but just in general, we need to We need to be able to do that. And this really helps us not to have to go to the taxpayers, whatever.
Absolutely.
To get that. But, and then you have, like you say, you have shovel projects. Shovel-ready projects, so.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I already talked to some people that said send it all back.
This is our federal tax dollars.
Our federal tax dollars, send it all back.
But if we don't
So
use
you
it,
get
somebody
the
else is
product.
going to.
Yeah, that money goes to a big city and gets buried
Yes.
somewhere.
Yeah, you don't.
This is my federal
And we
money.
still end up having to pay off the debt anyway.
I have way more faith in this group than I do any other city around, let me tell you, or
Okay,
state.
we were out of time, so we'll shoot for another meeting here
Thanks
and
for all your
I don't
input,
know.
Pat, you didn't get to say.
Can I make a request that, Johanna, would you summarize that and text it to all, or, I mean, email it to all of us so we can think about it for the next one?
Sorry, Sherry did, yes.
We do our own priorities.
Yeah, Sherry just sent it out, so it should be in your email.
Mr. Chairman, you do have two
Well, you're
members of
right.
the general public that would like to present. Let you know, I was just made aware of about 5 minutes ago.
That's what
I don't know.
You failed me, Ed, you failed me.
Huh?
You failed me.
Yeah.
I failed you. Sorry.
Yeah, just on that, yeah.
They were throwing.
Heard enough of my soapboxes.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll let Clearwater Financial do their progress presentation next week. And then after that presentation, then I was gonna say the next week.
I called them on it, so they had to apply for this evening.
Maybe they should be.
Well, that's, they
We have to
approved
pay
this
him though.
evening for the.
Yep, every time you have muffins, it'll be a big check.
An act permit.
Yeah,
Um,
we could either do November 28th or December 5th. It's wide open.
And I think, Joanna, you might want to get back on an agenda just for us, decide when, how much we should invest. That way we know we gotta keep 2.1 now.
Same stuff I use.
Can't secure that long, but the rest of it, we can stick away
Less
for a year or
usage.
two.
Less phenomenal.
Whatever you recommend.
TD and talk to them because I don't know all their.
I reckon.
I don't use a good connection for it. Connection.
I will have it at Fair Board.
Horse's mouth that goes
We
through
won't
it.
have to order bleachers, but it will be after that.
I'm just going off of what Brian Edwards has told
But I
me.
think if she's got, what, 5.3 and we have to take 2 out of it, we can put the 2 in short term for now.
Brian does not mind coming in,
Invested until the 30th.
talking to the commissioners. Brian Edwards, he's the one that runs this
There is
department.
kept some.
So he basically. I can't.
For the housing trust,
See
just
when he's available.
first year's executive director paid for that.
Come in and explain to you.
Yes, sir.
I think it's.
We're not done yet. We have more stuff here.
Well, they switched, they started switching to this blue.
We still have, we're
2
way
more
behind.
things, 3 more things.
They talked about.
At the end, at the very end. Okay, we're gonna move on with our meeting.
Can we do that before the
What, public hearing?
public comment?
No. No, I don't think so. That can go on for a long time. Our next agenda item is not an action item. This is a workshop, or, excuse me, this is a presentation from Dr. Royce Hudson's, sorry, I got that wrong, from the Valley County Opioid Response Project 22. Dr. Hudson, come on up to the mic, please. And welcome. I apologize for running a little bit late.
Not a problem at all.
If you could introduce just your name and the town you live in, I don't need your address.
Sure.
For the record.
My name's Dr. Royce Hudson. I'm a professor at Boise State, representing Valley County Opioid Response Project. I'm their program evaluator. I've been evaluating substance abuse prevention programs in Valley County since 2014.
Okay, in 2014.
Since 2014, yeah. But first with Youth Advocacy Coalition and now at VCOR.
Okay.
So thank you again. A couple things I just want to talk about is we ran a research project over the summer talking with adult stakeholders involved in substance abuse prevention, intervention, and recovery, along with several focus groups with boys and girls in Valley County, primarily in McCall, but I'll talk about that in a second. And then also some directed interviews with criminally justice involved youth as well. around substance use and their perceptions and attitudes around use, and their perceptions of adults' acceptance of use. And then we talked to both with the adult stakeholders and with the children about next steps, what they think should happen in terms of prevention of abuse and treatment of abuse, as well as sort of what they thought the drivers of use were in the county. So with that, a couple different things I want to talk about. First, I want to talk about what the adults said and what they felt were important aspects, and then talk about the kids as well. As far as the adult focus groups, like I mentioned, it was stakeholders. They represented a variety of sectors within the county: law enforcement, medical providers, social service providers, government officials. So it was a nice broad section of that. This was across the county. So we also talked to them about things like the culture of use, both of alcohol and drugs within the county, the availability of drugs and alcohol for both youth and illegal drugs for all, and the perceptions of, they thought, of parents of their kids, their own kids using. So what we found was, through all of these various focus groups, was that alcohol and marijuana are by far the most used drugs across the board for both boys, girls, directed interviews, adult stakeholders. That was by far. The other one was vaping. It was thought by many of the kids that over about half of the kids were vaping right now. Also, too, they felt about half of the kids were drinking at some point or another regularly. This aligns some with our previous surveys, where we looked at, back in 2015, we did a survey of all the schools in Valley County and found that ever using was about 50%, and current using, which means in the past 30 days, was around 25 to 30%. So it seems that their observations are probably not really too inaccurate, at least from what we know from our most recent survey. Like I said, it was some time ago. And we're planning on doing some surveys again around those issues. For the other illicit drugs, it doesn't seem to be a problem. So methamphetamines, opioids, prescription drug abuse, none of those things seem to be an issue. So that's great. What we had found earlier focus groups going back to about 2018 and 2016, 15, is what we found was that there had been some reports of kids using Ritalin and Adderall off-label, spreading it amongst their friends and peers. That doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. So the real issues are alcohol and marijuana. For the youth in particular, marijuana was actually seen to be easier to get than alcohol, though alcohol was also thought to be easily obtained. Most of it was because of the fact that Oregon in particular has legalized marijuana. What they're reporting to us is that there's literally folks that go to the dispensaries across the border, buy, and then resell or take pre-orders and come back and deliver those orders at a premium. And so that's how marijuana is being obtained. Generally speaking, they're not smoking leaf marijuana anymore as much as they are vaping marijuana or THC and eating edibles. But by far, it seems to be that they're vaping marijuana. It's easier to conceal for them. It's also very easy for them to conceal vaping overall in schools because the vape detectors apparently are easily defeated through a variety of methods. So with regards to obtaining alcohol, it seems that, again, it's not very hard to do, maybe slightly less than marijuana. They're getting it from other young adults who they know who have just turned 21 and are buying for them. The other ways that they're actually stealing it from various grocery stores. They apparently are aware of where the security cameras are and how to shoplift. So they're obtaining alcohol that way as well. There are some reports of parents that are providing alcohol to them at chaperone parties. And a couple kids conveyed some anecdotes about attending or knowing of places in which this was occurring as well. Some kids are stealing from their parents, unannounced to them, the parents that is. So that is how they're getting alcohol for the most part. As far as a culture of use, For the adults and for the kids, I think there were a little bit of different opinions about what the culture was like. But in both cases, everyone thought that there was somewhat of a party culture because of the recreational nature of the county, especially in McCall. So what we found is that the kids didn't think that the folks coming up for second homes and tourists were the ones were really influential. They had their own friend set. They hung around with them solely. They really didn't interact. But however, and this is true for both adults and kids as well, is that it seems to be among the adults themselves a permissive attitude around drinking overall. This is especially true for folks in law enforcement who told us that they thought there was a real permissive attitude, both about use in general, but also use among adolescents by the parents and the community at large. But particularly troubling, I think, for us was in the school settings was that they felt, the kids felt that the schools really weren't conveying, how do I say this? They felt that it was permissive, if you will, to vape in school, that there wasn't really a strong focus on preventing substance use among their peers. What they felt was that the current prevention efforts, one kid called it laughable. They show a video out of date, somebody pushing drugs on a kid with a bad acting and the whole thing, and the children feel like it's not taken seriously. But people make fun of it. It only happens once or twice a year. It's completely ineffective. In fact, it may be even going at cross purposes because it's so poorly developed, if you will. They also noted too that it seems because, at least for the girls anyway, was that they felt that because there was this permissive atmosphere and there's not a lot in their minds, not a lot of punishment for kids who did get caught, especially vaping, that school teachers and administrators were kind of burnt out in their minds about enforcing the regulations around vaping and other things. So that now it's just there's no signaling by teachers or administrators that this is a bad thing to do. So that was very troubling to us as well. Let me see here. As far as adults go, law enforcement representatives told us that for DUIs currently the BAC levels are going up when they do arrest folks. So, and this has been trending for some years now. It's very troubling to them. And actually, I think is an interesting data point is in terms of that sort of the idea of the party culture. When you're catching folks and they're having higher and higher levels of alcohol use, that's very concerning for us in prevention as well. Law enforcement officials also that we talked to felt that the decreasing penalties for youth use and adult use as well in some regards was, but mostly for youth, was decreasing the disincentive to use, diversion and other things, ordinances that created as a sort of a civil infraction instead of a criminal. These things they felt was problematic in terms of deterrence. With regards to youth, talking about youth culture, it seems that all the kids were pretty much the same at risk. One kid did think, in particular, that athletes might be more prone to use than others, but in general, everybody said that it was across the board. So it wasn't just one particular clique, if you will, the geeks or the jocks or whatever. It was everybody. Generally, because of the nature of the small schools, everybody kind of knew everybody else. There was a couple kids did convey that they felt that there were some sort of using cliques, if you will. That is, these kids, they party, they know where to go to the parties on the weekends. They attend those frequently. And so that's why, that's the sort of the cliquishness. It's not necessarily around, the smart kids and the athletes and all these other things that you might think of in terms of youth cliques. For the kids, they felt that the perceived adult attitudes towards youth use was very much declining with regards to vaping and marijuana use, but increasing for alcohol use. So that was interesting as well. So there did seem that they felt like the parents were against booze, so to speak, but not either not talking about it or making it an issue for them with regards to vaping or marijuana. Let me see here. Oh, the good news is that unlike what the adults felt was that there was a major peer pressure element, and this is also true with a lot of the literature as well on youth use, is that when we talked to the kids, they didn't feel like there was any pressure to use by their friends. So yes, it's here. You want some, you can get it. If you don't, that's great too. And there was no sort of social censorship or ostracization if you didn't use. That's great news. What you don't want is to be using to be cool, right? And it seems that in this place that's not the case. And in fact, one kid said, "Why would I want to give somebody my marijuana? It's expensive." Right? So it's not so much. It's not so much. It's like, "Oh, do you want to use?" No, great, more for me.
Yeah.
So what do they use? Primarily outside. So secluded places away from law enforcement, away from the eyes of their parents. They track each other using social media apps that have geolocators, so they can. In fact, one student actually showed me that. It's like, "You see this? This is where all my friends are right now. If it's a weekend night, and they got the app, they don't even have to have an invite to a party. They can look and see where people are." So
They have way too much knowledge.
they're very tech savvy, obviously, and they're using it to congregate in places around the valley. A good thing is that it's earlier surveys going back about 8 years ago. There used to be a lot more house parties, and there used to be more parties in people's homes that weren't home, and that doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. The other kind of green shoots, it seems, is that, especially for McCall with regards to Winter Carnival and 4th of July, it seems that those issues around kids using at those events seem to be declining as well as a result of various changes in ordinances and such and practices. So that was good news. They do however, have a tendency, according to them, to pre-party before large events like football games and other sort of school-related or community-related events. So with regards to next steps, so when we asked them, what should we do about this? There was some consensus around both kids and adults around some of the things we should be doing. The kids overwhelmingly said that they're bored. It was interesting talking about activities that were not related to the outdoors. That's exactly what they said. They specifically mentioned that for kids that were not invested in outdoor activities, skiing, snowboarding, snowmobiling, etc., is that especially during the wintertime, they don't have anything to do. On the weekends, they go out. What are we going to do? Teenagers are, lots of adrenaline and nothing to do with it. And so what are you going to do? Let's go hang out with folks. The availability is there. It's not hard to see where, even if they weren't inclined necessarily to use, but booze is available or weed is available there, that they would go ahead and use after a while. And not necessarily because I said it like a direct peer pressure, is because their other peers are doing it. So it's indirect peer pressure. And so what they've suggested, the kids, and this is somewhat true for the adults as well, is that we need to occupy their time in some sort of pro-social fashion. It really shouldn't lean into the outdoors aspects of it. Most of the kids suggested huge legacy projects like water parks, bowling alleys, arcades, those sort of things that kids generally like to do that doesn't relate to the outdoors. Now, with regards to adults that were different from the kids, there was a couple of things, I think. One was around increasing parental resources and parental engagement in substance abuse prevention for youth. Obviously, VCOR, we're trying really hard. Our resources are limited to do that. And a lot of it, I think, is the parents don't know how to talk to their kids necessarily well about these issues, don't talk to them enough about these issues, a combination of both. And there's not other resources as well, and that they may not be aware of that we do currently have in place that we need to get out there and try to market ourselves a little bit better. Also, too, in general, we just want to increase parental engagement with the kids overall. And that was something that came out of adult focus groups as well. We know from literature that if the parents know where their kids are most of the time and there's regular meals and all these other things, they're way less likely to use. And this is what I think the adults were saying in this focus group. There were some other more specific suggestions around social services, such as safety training for girls, increasing youth-oriented social services, not just necessarily for treatment or recovery, but also to just for a crisis, if you will. Like that, they don't. That was a disappointing thing I didn't mention earlier is that, especially for girls, they didn't feel like the counselors and teachers at their schools or administrators were trusted authorities to talk about certain things, and so adults felt. Well, not because of this, but adults also kind of mimic this by saying we don't have enough of these resources for kids to go and talk to somebody who's trusted about, say, not just drugs and alcohol, but other youth problems. And in general, too, they also, so that's, well, there were some other suggestions around peer groups as well from the adults, but I do want to say that the kids felt that the youth groups currently that exist are not very attractive to them. So there are peer groups now and youth groups now in place. Most of them felt that they were faith-based and maybe didn't respond to their particular needs for peer support. And the adults said, on the other hand, we need more peer groups. So I think what may necessarily be is we need to rethink peer groups and how we organize them and promote them so that they better reflect what the youth are looking for. And that's really leads to finally sort of our recommendations as an organization, which are pretty much increasing parental involvement, like I mentioned before, through various avenues, outreach and promotion, maybe expanding certain resources that we have in place currently, increasing activities for youth that's youth driven. And I think this is a key point here, is that a lot of the stuff I feel and we feel has been sort of, this is what we think kids want, instead of asking kids, what do you want? And having them not only ask them by surveys or focus groups, but also have them involved in the planning, doing youth leadership development, that sort of stuff, bringing kids in, making it sort of attractive for them to become involved. Would one, develop youth leadership, but also two, would be the projects would probably be a lot more responsive to youth aspirations and preferences. Increase social services for youth. We recently got a pretty good grant through behavioral health. So hopefully we'll be able to expand some of those social services for youth, especially as it relates to substance use. But we should definitely think about how we can expand that further. And lastly, engaging in the schools. We at VCOR have tried very hard to engage schools over the years with limited success. We've had some successes in the past, and places where we didn't excel as we'd hoped. We're going to keep trying, and there's some green shoots there. However, without the schools' active involvement, I see us only tackling half the problem. Kids spend a lot of time in school. A lot of school-based programs are very good at helping kids preventing them from using drugs and alcohol. And we need to promote those sorts of programs in the schools. Include school administrators and teachers and get them involved in VCOR or other activities that promote substance abuse prevention. So that's all I have, and thank you for your time.
Well, that was very, very interesting. I'm kind of excited the fact that the opioid use is way down. Was there any discussion or survey on cigarettes?
Cigarettes, for the most part, aren't really an issue because vaping has pretty much supplanted cigarette use. It's extraordinarily down. It's almost inverse, 1 to
You
1.
think that was due to the fact that the cost of cigarettes or the cost of that product? I don't know. I don't buy vape stuff. I never have. I don't know how much it costs, but to me, it's always been, even in my case, I can't afford to buy cigarettes anymore,
I think for them, there's a cool factor that goes with vaping that's not associated with cigarettes. Cigarettes is an old person's habit. So,
Sorry.
so vaping, however, is not. And, there's lots of different flavors. Now there, that
And you can't smell it.
and you can't smell it. That's another good
Who do you think
point.
they're targeting? I mean,
You
the
know,
cigarette
you have to
industry
have a
has
lighter. I mean, there's all kinds of smells. It makes your hair stink. The whole thing, right? So, why would you do that when you can get the same nicotine buzz off a vape and it's easily concealable?
So, what about health risk? I mean, cigarettes versus vaping. Do you think there's any thought process going into that from a kid's standpoint?
I think the way the marketing has been, yes. I think in their minds, vaping is less dangerous than smoking, even though the research doesn't suggest that.
Not at all.
So, that's a more national problem around how vaping has been marketed and how we should promote practices that don't do that or allow for that, laws, etc. So I certainly would advocate for restrictions on vape advertising because I think it has a lot to do with how they perceive vaping as being safer and cooler than cigarette smoke.
You could expand that to marijuana. How's it feeling? How's that being regarded by the young people?
The earlier focus groups we did when we talked to kids, they were very well aware of the health impacts. So the health classes around, this is what smoking does to your lungs, this is what this does to you, blah, blah, blah. They were very well aware of all of those sort of facts and figures. But they were, they're so young, it's hard for them to internalize that. And of course, that's an age of high risk taking.
And they're invincible.
Right, exactly.
They're invincible.
Exactly. And so it's not going to happen to me sort of mindset where the facts are there, but it's not, cognitive dissonance doesn't occur. So it's just, okay, vaping's bad for me, but it's not as bad as cigarettes. And I like the way it makes me feel. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I'm 16 years old and, bad things happen to 60-year-olds. So I've got plenty of time.
Idaho Association of Counties is actually going to back legislation to actually charge vaping the same way they do cigarettes.
That's
They get
great.
exactly the same, tax on this. But I've had coroners tell me that vaping's actually so much worse on their lungs than cigarettes. Cigarettes are black lung. Vaping is like cottage cheese lungs.
Yeah.
I mean, if kids just would do any kind of research, it's
Well,
horrible.
if you look back over the years, and I'm sure you can help with this one, but if you look at it, tend to look back about, say, 50 or 60 years ago. I mean, I grew up, raising tobacco, and it was like this, there was just no thought about even health issues with it, it seemed like. But it does seem like as the years progress, there may have been some positive things happening there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, use of dip, use of smoking, all those sort of tobacco-related uses are down. And they've been going down for some time. So that's great news. And Valley County reflects that national trend. Now it's just a matter of how do we get vape off the radar.
Yeah, it's not like the problems are all gone away, but in other words, it's not like we're in the new age of really, really bad. It seems like,
Substance abuse is a game of whack-a-mole. Right?
Yeah.
So this is our problem right now is vaping.
I know years ago in Health District, one of the programs that we pushed were mainly on tobacco at that time, was to take all the cigarettes that are right down here in the front case that the little kids come in, they look in there and go, ooh, and put them up high where they can't see them or up above where they can't see them at all. And that really, I think, worked great. Because all of a sudden it's not a sparkly thing to a 6-year-old or 7-year-old.
Well, the good thing about that is, and I didn't mention it in my presentation, but apparently getting vape cartridges in Valley County is not easy. So what they've done is they've gone down to Treasure Valley where they feel it's a lot easier to obtain vape materials.
We even have a vape shop in Valley County?
I'm not aware
The
of it.
cigarette one, Smoking Spirits, is right there by
So,
Maverick.
just in general, since say you started doing these studies, what just generally we better or worse? We're making progress.
I think things are getting better, but it's a slow road. And like I said, one thing goes down, another thing becomes more popular. So it's constant diligence is required in order to keep it low. We're very fortunate in a lot of communities. RX abuse is quite common among youth, and so it's we don't have that issue. We don't have a kid meth problem. There's a lot of good things that are happening here. But the thing with prevention is that you don't wait till it's already happened. I mean, that's not prevention, that's intervention.
Are you seeing Yak make a big difference? Their programming that came out of Yak?
I'm going to be partisan. Yeah, I mean, I've been working on GIAC for a long time. But yeah, I think it has made a
data
difference.
supports it.
I strongly support YAC and what they've tried to do with the limited resources they have. It's hard. Substance abuse prevention is not a cool thing, I don't think, in any generation. Like, oh yeah, how do I get involved in preventing my friends from drinking? It's not on the forefront of kids' minds of what's fun to do. But if we can get kids at least involved, and this was the interesting thing about the focus group participants. Yeah, it's a skewed group of kids who were willing to sit down and talk to us, which probably represents a non-user perspective, so to speak. That's also why we did some criminally justice involved youth as well, to kind of get their perspective. But at the end of the day, it seemed to me, from going back to 2015 or so, is that it's just not as acceptable to use now than it was back then.
Right.
Awesome. That's really good.
And we'll find out more, I think, when we start doing more quantitative surveys, in the schools that show us where we're at on this. But if we're following the trends that we're seeing in the focus groups, I think we're in good shape that way. I guess I would just argue that we need to keep diligent on this, especially as it relates to vape, because that could lead to lots of other drugs.
Well, a couple of things you made is kind of interesting. You talked about the kids looking for these things to do, and necessarily going out looking to smoke or do anything like that. It's just that it comes down to the fact of being engaged. We're in a pretty active community here. And from what you know about the other parts of the state, other parts of the country, how does their maybe lifestyle in this area affect this abuse that you're doing?
Well, I think the one thing is the isolated nature of the county. I think sometimes inoculates the county from some of the more urban trends that you're seeing. Even within Boise or Ada County, I think here, even though it's relatively close, the problems aren't the same. The problems are much different up here. Larger school systems, they have much more atomized cultures there. There's a lot more cliques, a lot less interaction among various youth groups. Isolation and ostracization becomes a real issue. Those sorts of things can lead to abuse as well. If I'm in a big, large school, 1,500, 2,000 kids, and I'm lost amongst all these kids and whatever, and I'm starting to get depressed and anxious as a result, that's going to have impacts on substance use. It seems to me that the kids here know each other and actually kind of care about each other. So that's a good thing. You get lost, I think, in much larger school districts. And so, I mean, the downside of not having as much resources and those sorts of things is a real concern. But the fact that there's a small community, people know what's going on. When we're talking to law enforcement about methamphetamine use, they're like, oh yeah, we know the dozen people who are active users and what they're doing and blah, blah, blah. And, there's outreach. I mean, that's the sort of thing that's so beneficial and makes it much better in terms of prevention, I think, than, a large place with, hundreds of thousands of people and large schools and atomized leadership. I mean, it's just so much harder to coordinate, and it's so much harder to deal with kids that are sort of on the fringes when you have large numbers.
Well, I think there's good news and there's bad news. And I think, like Ed said, this has been an ongoing issue for generations.
Absolutely.
Back to the moonshine days. And I guess as government, there's only so much you can do. I'm a little discouraged about your comments about the schools have been really hard to work with and get involved in, because I remember way back when I was at school, and there was a school back then, believe it or not, but they had a kind of a ceramic thing with a piece of lung in it of a guy that smoked, and here's one that didn't, and they passed that around to everybody, and that was how they got you to not smoke cigarettes, you know? And some of us didn't listen very well.
Right. The key was, it's like, we have to message so they do listen. And some of the messaging we're doing now is apparently, according to them, is ineffective.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how you could triumph over that issue.
Now,
It's
again, I
almost
think,
like you need other kids to sell it to other kids.
I mean, yeah, essentially, yes. And the thing is that, again, going back to youth planning, youth being involved in the planning, even if it's one or two kids who just want to become nurses or public health or interested in public health or social work, that would be great. Because at least you have that perspective. You know, maybe it's skewed, maybe they were never going to use or whatever, and they don't hang around that crowd. They certainly hang around people who hang around that crowd.
Right. Well, thanks, Dr. Hudson. I'm sorry we're kind of out of time. I appreciate the report.
Yeah, you're welcome.
If there's anything that we can do as far as funding or listen to Yak or some of those groups, please
Up
let us know.
next, and they started smiling.
Yeah. I have the full report. If you're interested, I can leave a hard copy, or I can email you a PDF, however you would like it.
PDF, I would love to see that, yeah.
All right, I'll make sure that all you get the full report.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for
Have
all
a
your
great
work.
day.
You too.
Okay, I'm sorry we're about a half hour behind, but we'll catch up by the end of the day. Our next agenda item is an action item, and this is a request from Ignite Idaho. Ladies, come right on up to the mic. Please give me your name and the town you live in for our records.
Okay, my name is Tracy Jamison, and I live in McCall, Idaho.
And I'm Shannon McKnight, and I live in Donley. Just celebrated 45 years, Valley County resident.
Congratulations.
You were actually born here?
I thought you were, I was gonna say.
You're almost a local, Shannon. A local is a person that's too broke to leave. Hey, you're up.
So interestingly enough, we also worked with Royce and Shelley on that focus group. A lot of those kids were kids that we asked to come, and they were more than willing to help give some feedback on the drugs and alcohol in the area. So I just opened a nonprofit organization about a year ago. We service Adams and Valley County. We're working, really wanting to strengthen families, help prevent child abuse, work with families that are struggling with substance use disorder. We are doing it through education, parenting classes. We've got mental health services. We just did a trauma-informed care seminar for Ski Patrol, 2 separate sessions, 40 to 60 people in each session, just teaching them what's going on in the world right now, addiction, trauma, abuse. We have a parenting class going on right now. It's a 6-week program. It's called Parenting with Love and Logic. We have 20 families, so 20 adults on average that are coming with at least 20 kids.
Awesome.
We're giving free dinner, free childcare. All they have to do is come. That has been such a successful program for this community. We also have a teen group, so kind of going on what he's talking about. We have on average 5 to 15 kids that come. We have it weekly, and we're doing like rock painting, just kind of getting down on their level, doing icebreaker type activities. They're talking, they're asking for help. A lot of kids are saying, hey, our parents are drinking, so it's really easy to drink. It's really easy for us to get access to this. We don't want to be like that. We don't like what we see. So, just kind of adding to Royce, it is a huge concern. There isn't a place to go to have a sober-free environment for these kids. So Ignite Idaho, we were here, I don't know, a few months ago, we put in the $2 million grant. So we did go through that process, and Ada County got the grant only due to population. So we could only say maybe we would service 80 to 100 people in the time they could service over 500. So we worked with the school districts, probation, St. Luke's, Yak, The Rock. I mean, I could name Jamie's Place, all these organizations, Central Idaho Counseling. We are all working as a team to get a resource for these kids. We just secured a location at the Park Street Plaza. We have 3 offices there now, but where McPaws used to be, it's about 650 square feet. We're going to get that December or January, and we will be making our resource center larger. We're still looking for an actual building that we can have all of the resources in together. But right now, this will start allowing kids to come in. We're going to call it the teen hour at the beginning and give different times during the day and the weekend that they can come in. We want to have vending machines that are free. They just come and grab a snack, grab a drink. They can talk to a counselor if they want. They can talk with somebody from The Rock. We're right across the hall from The Rock. So it's going to give this resource that is not really here right now the ability to just start having people come in. It doesn't matter who you are and where you came from. It doesn't matter how much money you have or you don't have. If you have a problem, if you need a resource, we want them to call us. We've got a number. They can call, they can walk in, and they can just say, hey, this is what we need. If we can't provide it ourselves, we'll find somebody who can. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I lived at the Shepherd's Home for 5 years, a group home for kids. I've been a foster parent for 17 years. I've seen these kids and these families struggle, and I have found that gap that we haven't had. Working with VCOR, HRSA, we just got a $135,000 grant for 4 years, Ignite Idaho, to help these families. We got Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation. They gave us a grant. We've had a couple really significant donations just so we can start developing this program for these kids and these families. We just hired on Shannon McKnight, Shiloh Upson, and Tiara Clark. They're going to be working within the program to add more services. Another thing that Royce mentioned is kind of connecting the parents and the kids. December 13th, Shannon and I are going to a training. Ashley McCoy, she's my partner. She also has this training already. It's active parenting for teens. What it is a support group for the parents and a support group for the teens. And then you come together and you learn how to communicate with each other about maybe sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever that looks like, and teaching them how to be able to be open with each other and get the help rather than fight and it just be more of a conflict. So with all that being said, we really need additional funding for, to get this teen group more developed. If you look at your the Exhibit A that you guys have for this opioid use disorder money, there's different parts throughout it. Part A, we have already in our program licensed professional counselors, marriage counselors that are here working daily with trauma, with substance use disorders that already are working with Ignite Idaho to fulfill this as part of this money. Trauma, individuals with sexual assault, human trafficking, survivors of overdose, grief. and so some of those, number 11, the scholarship and support for behavioral health practitioners. We'd love to be able to get more people on board to help these kids, get more training. In part 1B, our resource center is set up in a way that provides so many different services for these families. We have grief counseling, we have marriage and family therapy, substance use. We've got a whole program of people that can do visitations for families that can't be with their kids until they are sober. So there's already all of these things that are developed. We just want to reach these people. We want them to know that we're there, and all they have to do is ask for the help.
And these are opioid related. This is what you're focusing on because those opioid funds are so specific.
So all of these families.
Those are specifically from there, so you guys can see that we're already doing the things that they want you to use that money for.
Okay.
So if you look at each number, like number 11, number 10, engage with nonprofits, faith-based communities, coalitions to support the treatment of these people. Most of the kids that I see in my counseling sessions right now have either they're using, their parents are using, or somebody in their family is using, to be able to give them these resources, a sober place to go, hang out, be able to talk to somebody about what they're seeing in their own environments is so important right now. So with that being said, we're wanting to ask for about, $15,000 to be able to say, here's $10,000 to get this teen group really up and going, and then $5,000 to give free services. I don't want them to have to think about, how am I going to pay for this? Do you take my insurance? I don't even have insurance. How do you get on Medicaid? There's all these resources that we want to offer them, but to be able to get them to come and to be able to pay some of these other therapists. We have about 4 therapists that are willing to work with us there's so many right now. We're all just full, but we want to be able to say, hey, here's 5 for each of us that we're going to work with through Ignite to start this process. We'll work with the kid, we'll work with the families, and just start solving this, problem that we're having
We
now.
have 68,000. We received unanticipated funds.
And Doug, are we using those on anything right now that is a?
The only contribution that has been made to the Rock, if you guys recall, and that was in fiscal year 2022. I do believe that they are going to be asking for another contribution for fiscal year 2023 in the same amount, a similar amount that was asked for.
But we have some resources available. Is that what I'm hearing?
This is the opioid settlement dollars,
Yeah,
Commissioner Allen. We have received 60, what we have on hand is $68,697.55.
And this fits into that, in your opinion?
It does. They have been provided with it's basically the approved opioid abatement strategies that was submitted to us from the Attorney General's office, that has been provided to Ignite Idaho as well as the Rock. So they're fully aware of the requirements.
So,
And I do want to mention that I did just talk with Luke at the Rock today. One of the hard pieces for the Rock is right now they're doing a lot of adult services. They really don't have the capability to work with the youth right now. So us to be able to fulfill that for them, they're just such a great organization. They're so willing to help us as well. Just be able to give this service to the community.
but it seems to me like that we have this resource, and I guess I'm questioning your $15,000. Does that make you whole, or does that just kind of get you above board, your head above water?
So like I said, we have a grant from Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation. We've got the grant from Central District Health, the HRSA grant. We've gotten numerous donations for other pieces of this, to pay our employees, to do the parenting class. This is more for this teen piece. After we heard the results of the focus groups that Royce was able to do, we thought, we've done this last school year, we did the teen group. We didn't have a lot of funding for it. We met at the Rock. They were allowing us to use their area, their facility. We had to be very careful because if there was adults in there, then we couldn't be in there. So they had to make a specific time for us to be in. We had to be out by a certain time. We were using their food, their stuff. So, we talked to them. We talked to probation. We've talked to all these other places, St. Luke's, and everybody's like, man, we all want the same thing. How can we make it happen? So, we let everybody, all the buildings know, like, hey, we need a place. So we, heard last month that we can move into this other area. It's a larger area. We're going to have to, have that paid for. There's food for the kids. There's somebody managing it while they're there. Eventually Shannon actually has a few different teenagers that are going to work with her on developing what we're going to call it. What are we going to put in it? I don't know if you've seen the one from Cascade, the Game Changer. We want to do something very similar to where they have, ping pong, maybe a bowling lane, a movie night, all these things so they can come and know, hey, I don't have to go hang out with these other kids to feel accepted. I have a place to go. I have a place for myself. And I'm going to meet people that are thinking the same way I am. That's what we need right now.
I understand what you're saying. The only thing is I know that there's multiple different groups out there.
Yeah.
So if we overcommit, somebody else may not be able to come in and ask for help also. So if what you need right now is 15,000, then I think that would be a support level, which they could go out, start this project, have a year under their belt. If they come back and they can say, this is how many kids we've helped, this is the type of response we've seen. And so it's data driven at the end of the day if we support at a higher level.
The reason I asked that question is I just don't want to just throw enough out there to be a carrot. I want it to work.
Absolutely.
And if that's what, in other words, to me, I'm sold. I think.
I'll let you know this too. So for 17 years, this has been my goal because I've worked with foster kids. I've adopted 7 kids. No, they don't have what they need.
Yeah.
So I've done it for free and it's worked for 17 years. So to be able to put it into a building, get other people that are passionate about these kids and say, hey, we got this. Come. What do they say? If you build, they'll come. That's what we're here for. We want to build. We want them to come. We want them to feel like they have a place.
Eventually, when we do a sports complex, we could put little tiny areas.
Yes.
I just actually thought about that back to our last conversation where we're talking about ARPA and where we can spend it and how we can have long-term benefits, how we can, healthy community is just extremely important.
Yes.
And they may need grant match, for something in the future. I know that there is building, there's facility funding out there.
Yeah.
And I have worked with, I don't know if you know Tiffany Dobbs, she's with St. Luke's. I've worked with her closely. One of her supervisors is Aaron. I just did a training with Aaron and Tyler, and they have reached out to me to say they opened up a facility in Wood River, and they're very interested in helping us seek more opportunities to have our own facility, an area where we can have resources for these families, including a big area for these kids to come in and just play and hang out, to be able to have different people come in and be able to teach them. Mm-hmm. What about music? What about piano? What about guitar? There's so many opportunities. We're just at that first phase of saying, okay, we have what we need. We have the data that is necessary. Now we're looking for the funding to say, okay, we're going to get started. Here's where we're going to be. Yeah. Next step's going to be the building. How do we get that? Is that a donation? Is that funding? Is that, fundraising?
Are you ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. You've sold us. We don't need you.
I can keep talking.
Okay. I make a motion that we will honor their request for $15,000 for this project.
Got a motion and a second. And I've been kind of quiet about this because we've been involved with this at the health district quite a bit. And I'm really glad you guys are stepping up to do this because this is what what it takes. People from the community to step up. However, I'm going to warn you, you got to make sure you really tie this into opioid use. Because
Absolutely.
if it's audited later and it's found out not, then we're going to have a really bad issue.
Mr. Chairman, just
It
to
looks like
be
they have.
clear, it's not only opioid, it's also substance abuse disorder.
So
If
we-
you look
yeah.
at the requirement, it
Oh,
does
good,
say
good.
opioid, but it also does include any substance use disorder.
And if you look at those documented pieces that we gave you on the
Yep,
paper, the
yep.
numbers, it does kind of break it down on that trauma for the other family members in the home, you know, that counseling piece,
Yeah.
adding a sober environment for these kids.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to throw in too is that I think there's been 3 pharmacies that have settled. And this is payment from those lawsuits that are going to go somewhere around 18 years. So this is going to be some long-term funding. But there's going to be other pharmacies that are still in litigation. So there may be more funds coming down the road later.
Well, maybe we need to talk about, I mean, I'm fully in support of this, but maybe we need to talk about, these funds and doing some kind of a physical,
Oh,
space if there's gonna be that much more additional funding and it's for 18 years.
it's hard to do that now because we don't know what those funds are. Everything's in litigation still. I think it was Pfizer that just settled for $12,000 that we get in our district. So it depends on the pharmacy and how much they sold and that kind of stuff, but,
And the last dollars that we received, commissioners, was actually for 5 years of their payments.
Oh, got it, okay.
well, it's not, so it's 5 years added together.
Correct.
So they settled for a lot lower value. But I think this is great. I'm not trying to discourage you. And I think long-term, there's gonna be some more funding down the road. I kind of see this as an annual come in and request kind of a thing, so keep that in the
Yes.
back of your mind, okay?
No, I appreciate it. And like I said, we are looking at some donors. We're looking at land. We're looking at, we know a lot of builders in the community that we've worked with, and just being able to get them all together and say, hey, if we do get a piece of land, would everybody be willing to do something like they did with the Heartland food pantry? So we're really working on all these different avenues. So every little piece helps.
And then part of this, it's not part of the motion, but we would like to see some stuff back every year.
Okay.
Some data to kind of show, hey, it's working, it's not
Absolutely.
working. That kind of a deal, so we can continue with this, but.
And commissioners, also just to share, there's also a reporting requirement to the state that I have to do. So
You
I
have to
just
do,
want to make
okay.
sure that the commissioners are fully aware of that.
So we got a motion and a second to invest $15,000 into this program. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Thank you so
And
much.
you'll have to hit Doug up for the bucks, because he's the one that writes the check.
So don't be so
Chairman,
long-winded.
before we move on,
Yeah, we're gonna take a quick break.
well, I'm wondering if we don't cut Jeff loose and do his personnel later, because we're already almost an hour behind. We could do our executive session on the Four Corners Fire stuff, but we're not gonna be out of here until 6 o'clock.
Is that all right with you, Pat?
That's fine with me.
Okay, so we'll do away with the last
Sorry, Jeff.
executive session.
We're not sorry, but I hate to make you wait for any more time. And then we can move forward with our next 2, but
Yeah. So we reschedule Jeff, is that what
5
you're
minutes
asking?
break.
Next week.
Okay,
okay.
yeah. So that's probably quite a relief, isn't it, Jeff?
Wow.
So then we can have our executive session with Brian, and then it looks like we have general public here, so we can open it up for general public after that.
agenda item is an action item, and this is the Four Corners Fire Public Information Plan. Cinda, turn it
Okay.
over to you.
I've shared this information with you previously. What I'm requesting is if the board wants to fund public information, I've come up with a plan to get the word out to the people on the fire over here, the Four Corners Fire, that they probably should get flood insurance. As you're aware, there's 562 acres that were burned on private property. 19% of the fire area is assumed to have fire-induced water repellency. It's going to take 2 to 5 years to revegetate those areas so that it will stabilize. And there could actually be mud flows up to 7 years from now. And so the National Flood Insurance Program is asking us to let people know that they should obtain the flood insurance because a mud flow is a flood. Your regular insurance will not cover that. So I am recommending that we do a notice to each of the property owners with improvements. Dee Dee is getting us a list of any lot over there that has improvements on it. And we could send them a postcard and postage on each of those. Let's see, 650 recipients would cost about $150 to put together. $120 in postage for a total of $270. I'd like to take out a newspaper ad. We'll work with Mackenzie to do the social media and then maybe hang some flyers around town and hopefully we'll pick up everybody.
So you're shooting for around $500?
I'm thinking about 500, if 600, depending upon what the Star News is.
It's really critical to do this.
And I think it's great you're willing to take that on, Cinda, and do that work.
Well, yeah, I'll be working with Mackenzie. She's the one that said she can put together, I'll put the information together and then she can do the postcard.
So, Cindy, I think it'd be really important to work with that Barrett team or whatever they're using at Payette National Forest on that
This
one.
came from them.
Yeah, and I'm the only thing that struck me when I heard it is suggesting that everybody over there should get flood insurance, and it's a little more complicated than that. You know, not everybody is in floodplain, that has homes over there, and
But if there's a mud flow, Ed, from the fire, if the ground becomes too saturated and there's a mud flow, even if you're not in a floodplain, that's considered a flood.
And I think all we're doing is notifying them to do their research.
But then
It's
if
on
you-
them to research.
Yeah, okay, so if you have all these homeowners and the closest that fire came to them was 1,000 feet above their property, I don't know, it just gets complex. What I like to think is we'd advise a review of their property as opposed to, everybody's got to buy insurance.
No, we're just gonna,
In other words, just if you're there, take a look at your issue, your particular site, and do some homework. Obviously, flood insurance costs money. And
Talk to your insurance agent.
Yeah.
But that way it takes it off us. If we have information that we should
yeah.
share, I think we should share it and then totally put it back on the homeowners, You should go research this.
well, this is this process is it's already kind of been shared, but we're taking it on a little bit more personally, and so that's the only thing that I would caution is going out. You guys better buy insurance. Review their specific,
Yeah, I think they need to review where their parcel
Yeah.
sits. If you're on top of a knob,
Yeah.
you're probably not gonna need it, but if you're down the bottom next to the brook, you might wanna think about it.
So
I think this is a great public service and.
Yeah, and I think it's
We're not
great,
forcing anybody.
but, yeah,
and then, offer to give them more information if they're interested.
yeah, that's the thing.
And
is like-
maybe put some insurance contacts on there because it's not gonna be, the expensive Mississippi River Delta
Yeah.
cost.
No. Yeah,
We'd rather just take
Anyway,
it out
I'm,
of
I'm all in favor of doing that,
Okay.
but I just want to be careful that we don't
Expense
say,
line.
you better buy it. In other words,
And then the.
I will,
We're
I
gonna
will word
advise you to
it,
review it.
advise you assess your situation.
yeah, all right.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and make the motion. We authorize up to $600 in expense to notify the West Mountain property owners of possible flooding issues from the Four Corners fire.
And I'll second that.
Moved in second. Any more discussion?
Commissioner, if I can just direct Cinda just to probably code that under 0105 under printing, or just give me the claim and I will code it for the commissioners. We'll just take it out of their expense line for printing.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Great,
It'll take us a while to put all the
thanks.
message together, but
Okay, our second to the last agenda item on our agenda is an executive session. Talk to our, communicate with legal counsel for the public agency, so I'm gonna have to ask everybody to leave, and then we shouldn't be very long, and then we will come back in and go open it up for public input. But this time I'd entertain a motion to go into executive per Idaho Code Section 742061F.
So moved.
Go ahead.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded by roll call, please. Okay,
Mop and I.
Al and I.
Jeff, will you
Hasbrook,
shut
aye.
the door, please?
Jeff, will you shut the door, please?
You have to say it too.
Doug will be in at